If it were not for Lin Yuan taking the lead, Hu Yen really did not know where to start. After all, his Hu family was also a part of the aristocratic families. Humph! Lin Yuan sneered and said expressionlessly, "What level is the Freedom Courtyard at?" With 3 Kongming realm experts in charge, the sect of the Divine Blood dared to block them and attack them. The defensive power of the Wang residence in the northern frontier is far inferior to that of the Freedom Courtyard. So what if I hide in the Wang residence in the northern frontier? If they really want to kill me, can't they block the Wang residence in the northern frontier? Hu Yen curled his lips and thought to himself, these are 2 different things. No matter how nicely the sect of the Divine Blood blocked the Freedom Courtyard, it was just a dispute in Jianghu. Not many people cared about how many bits and pieces were hidden in this matter. They just treated it as a show. However, if the sect of the Divine Blood blocked the Wang residence in the northern frontier, it was a different matter. This was called King Rebellion. They didn't even care about the Freedom Courtyard of the 3 Kongming sects, so why would they care about the Xinwu dynasty in the midst of a storm? After destroying our so-called Wang residence in the northern frontier, if the sect of the Divine Blood behaved a little better, wouldn't they still accept the edict of the Xinwu dynasty and become the new king of the northern frontier? Lin Yuan spat out another sentence. His tone was already cold. This time, Hu Yen opened his mouth but did not say a word. Lin Yuan was a demonic beast born in the Hengduan Mountains. In addition, he had consecutively destroyed cities on the northern frontier. Logically speaking, Lin Yuan should not be tolerated by the Xinwu dynasty. However, in order to stabilize the situation, the Xinwu dynasty still conferred a hereditary title of King of the Northern Frontier. Even the evil creature Lin Yuan was reluctantly conferred by the Xinwu dynasty as the god of the Northern Frontier. In name, he was in charge of good weather and peace. In fact, he gritted his teeth and handed over the Northern Frontier to Lin Yuan to govern. One of the reasons was that Lei Qiusheng wanted to see what would happen to the Northern Frontier after Lin Yuan's new policies were implemented on the Northern Frontier. However, more importantly, it was because Lei Qiusheng wanted to stabilize the situation on the Northern Frontier. There's no need to go. I've already checked. There's no one in the Church of the Blood God. Xia Xiu, who had snuck into the Northern Frontier King's mansion, suddenly spoke. Lin Yuan and Hu Yen followed the voice and looked over. They saw Xia Xiu sitting on the wall. The black robe he wore was stained with blood in many places. Xia Xiu's face was very pale. He looked like he had lost a lot of blood. However, the fact that he could still appear here meant that he had already taken care of his injuries. Seeing that the flood dragon and human were both at a loss, Xia Xiu jumped down from the wall and said in a deep voice, "The Church of the Blood God suddenly erupted with such powerful energy. It completely overturned the understanding of the association of the Demon Emperor. Furthermore, we have lost contact with the spies we planted in the Church of the Blood God. I had no choice but to personally take people there. I didn't expect that the Church of the Blood God had become an empty mountain. There was no one at all. However, they seemed to have expected that someone would sneak into the Church of the Blood God to investigate the situation. They even set up many traps. Of the 20 or so brothers who went with me, only 3 came out alive." Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. He wasn't surprised. After all, even Xia Xiu, a natural assassin with the gift of shadow affinity, was in such a mess. It was reasonable that the ordinary cultivators had suffered heavy losses. However, according to the information from the spies of the Northern Frontier and the Association of the Demon Emperor, the people of the Church of the Blood God swaggered out of the mountain gate of the Church of the Blood God during the day and then returned to the Church of the Blood God at night. According to Xia Xiu's temperament, if he didn't get some important information after sneaking into the Church of the Blood God, he definitely wouldn't give up. However, he came back empty-handed, which meant that there was indeed no one in the mountain gate of the Church of the Blood God. If they were just exploring the periphery, The spies trained by the association of the Demon Emperor wouldn't have lost so many people. However, if the entire mountain gate of the Church of the Blood God had been searched, then where were the people who entered and left the Church of the Blood God? Could there be some secret mechanism? Hu Yen asked with a frown. His expression was also not very good. Hu Yen had been in the northern frontier for a long time, but this was the first time he had heard of such a strange thing. Xia Xiu shook his head and said with a serious expression, I brought people to investigate the mountain gate of the Church of the Blood God and each mountain peak. There were no traces of any secret mechanism. I also picked some mountains to check. There were not many traces of man-made destruction. The entire mountain should still be solid. This chapter is for listening to G-Book friends. Add more. Thank you. Vote Mimi Go Cup. Chapter 391. What the hell is going on? Hu Yen muttered a few words, but his back was drenched in cold sweat. The trick of making people appear alive was not a trick. Those disciples of the Church of the Blood God were existences that could block the mountain gate of the Freedom Courtyard and wrestle with the disciples of the Buddhism sect. To say that they were illusions was purely self-deception. However, they could not understand at all how the disciples of the Church of the Blood God could appear out of thin air and then disappear into thin air. Lin Yuan just raised his eyelids. The Buddhism sect and the Confucian sect existed in this world. Although he had never seen ghosts and monsters, he could not deny that there were no such things in the Tianwu continent. After all, the existence of the black water of the Styx River was enough for Lin Yuan to overturn some of his previous conclusions. If there were ghosts and monsters, he could now release a group of them with his talent. Interesting. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a sneer. The reason for the sudden appearance and disappearance of the Church of the Blood God was still unclear, but he was certain that the sudden rise of the Church of the Blood God had nothing to do with the information he obtained from the palace. After all, none of those unspeakable existences would play such tricks. On the contrary, the action of confronting the Freedom Courtyard was a bit like the style of those existences. It's too interesting. Xia Xiu licked his lips, and a devilish smile appeared on his handsome face. He said in a cold voice, I wonder if these existences who are good at tricks will make the sound of their blood bleeding when I slit their throats with a dagger. For the bloodthirsty Xia Xiu, there was nothing more exciting than ending someone's life with his own hands. This was a psychological disease that Xia Xiu had been infected with after living among criminals for many years. Although Lin Yuan knew psychology, he was not a psychiatrist. He could not cure Xia Xiu's perverted disease, and could only say that his words went in one ear and out the other. He was an existence that could even control a sect with a void netherworld realm cultivator. Even the 3 void netherworld realm cultivators of the Freedom Courtyard had suffered quite a bit. An assassin who wasn't even a Heaven Star border realm cultivator wanted to slit his throat? Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and said in a deep voice, It seems that I have to go to the Freedom Courtyard this time. I wonder what new information those masters can give us. On the other side, a pale-faced young man was walking on the bustling street of Shunning City. His long hair, which reached his waist, was a mixture of black and white. His clothes were also a bit strange. He was wearing a Shuangjin dynasty martial crotch with a silver soft armor inside and a gray scholar's robe outside. His outfit looked a bit out of place, but no one on the bustling street gave him a second glance. That idiot Fire Qilin, did he die in such a desolate place? The strange man stretched his back and muttered to himself, However, there are 2 interesting fellows in this damned place. A human soul was actually able to cross the sea of bitterness and come to this world. He even possessed a black snake and became a demon. The other imitated the Fire Kirin and played with death, deceiving the world and becoming a second person. Speaking of this, the strange man spread out his right hand and his fingers kept shaking. He laughed and said, The beast of immortality is a demon, and the second person is a devil. I didn't expect that I would encounter such an interesting battle on this mission." Although the strange man did not mention names, just like the demonized Xuanwu that was suppressed in the secret realm, he instantly deduced Lin Yuan's origin. He even calculated the reason behind the rise of the sect of the Blood Divine. If Lin Yuan saw this scene, he would have opened his eyes wide and called him a god. At the same time, in the mountain gate of the sect of the Blood Divine, a young man in a blood-red robe suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He gritted his teeth and said, "How dare you calculate my origin? How dare you?" In the dark, a voice sounded. "Demons perish by themselves, while devils perish by the heavens. I was able to deduce your background, so I'm naturally not afraid of you making a fuss about it. If you want to wrestle with me, then you have to hide your name and background well. Don't let me see it. Otherwise, I only have to call out your name, and it won't be long before the heavenly tribulation arrives." Suddenly, the strange man's voice suddenly sounded. The malice in his tone was not concealed at all. "How dare you?" The blood-robed young man slammed the table beside him and said coldly, "If I hadn't just reincarnated and my cultivation hadn't recovered to the level of my previous life, requiring the blood sacrifice of thousands of people in the northern frontier, I could destroy an ant like you in a day's time. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me?" Old Demon Blood River, who was attracted by the blood-robed young man's slamming of the table, ran into the room and cupped his hands. He said, "Ancestor, why are you so angry? Could it be that my disciples have not treated you well?" The blood-robed young man shot a glance at old Demon Blood River. There was no change in his expression. He raised his hand and wiped the black blood at the corner of his mouth with his sleeve. He said with a pale face, "What about the things I asked you to prepare? 3,000 young boys and girls have been prepared. The various materials for setting up the array have also been purchased. Most of them have been stored in the warehouse. A small portion is on the way to the northern frontier, but an awkward look suddenly appeared on old Demon Blood River's face as he said in a deep voice, "Ancestor, this is no longer the era when you were all-powerful. The strange beasts you mentioned are all priceless ancient species in this world. Furthermore, they are priceless. It's impossible to obtain them in a short period of time." Trash. The blood-robed young man shot a cold glance at old Demon Blood River. The blood-robed young man was clearly only at the Heavenly Dipper realm, but old Demon Blood River was so frightened by his glance that he began to tremble. His legs went soft as he knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the blood-robed young man. He said in a deep voice, "How can I not take the ancestors' instructions seriously? I really don't have the strength to do so. It's just too difficult to silently obtain an ancient species as a primer for the array. Ancestor, please let me off this time." The blood-robed young man shook his head and sighed. "That Black Jiao has already noticed us. Before he realizes what we are going to do, we have to speed up the plan. What's more, now that an unknown bastard has joined the fray, there are more variables. Even I don't dare to say that I can control the entire situation." His original intention was to divert Lin Yuan's attention to the battle with the sections. However, he never expected that before Lin Yuan could even head to the Freedom Courtyard, the Demon Emperor Association had already found out about him. In addition, there was a fellow who could deduce his route. He was feeling even more uneasy. "Thank you for voting for me." Chapter 392. 4 hours later, Lin Yuan and the others came to the gate of the Freedom Yard. A group of monks in gray robes guarded the mountain gate with vigilant faces. They were no longer holding wooden sticks that could not even cause a scratch. Instead, they were holding demon-subduing pestles made of pure metal, Buddhist commandment blades, and other deadly weapons. "Stop!" The leading monk stopped Lin Yuan and the others who were going up the mountain. "How dare you? Even if you don't know me, you should know the Demon Emperor, right?" Hu Yen walked out of Lin Yuan's entourage with his sword in hand. His cold eyes fell on the monk who stopped them. In fact, as the person who slapped the face of the Freedom Courtyard, Lin Yuan was naturally no stranger in the eyes of the disciples of the Freedom Courtyard. However, what kind of juncture was the Freedom Courtyard at this time? 2 of the 3 Kongming realm cultivators in charge were disabled and 1 was injured. At this time, Lin Yuan coming to the Freedom Courtyard was definitely not a good thing. If he took advantage of this opportunity to uproot them, how could they explain? Unlike Hu Yen, who was in a hurry to go up the mountain, Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with a cold light. He turned around and rushed toward Shunning City. He didn't realize until now that he had been tricked. It was true that the Church of the Blood God blocked the Freedom Yard that wanted to move out of the northern frontier. However, it was not to force the sects in the northern frontier to stand with them and fight to the death with the northern frontier prince's mansion. Their purpose from the beginning was to attract the attention of Lin Yuan, who had been resting in the northern frontier prince's mansion. Especially after Xia Xiu investigated the Church of the Blood God, he found that there was no one in the gate of the Church of the Blood God. In order to get more information, Lin Yuan could only take people to the Freedom Yard to see if he could get some information from the monks who had fought with the Church of the Blood God. It could be said that the purpose of the Church of the Blood God from fighting to hiding was to lure Lin Yuan to the Freedom Yard. This was a play to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Therefore, the cultivators of the Church of the Blood God had probably entered Shunning City and done whatever they wanted. Lord Shifter Emperor Hu Yen couldn't care less about showing off his might to the disciples at the gate of the Free Courtyard. He hurriedly turned around and chased after Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan glanced at Hu Yen, pondered for a moment, and then said indifferently, "I still have some things to deal with. You take some people to the Freedom Courtyard first and see if you can get some information. We can't make this trip in vain." Lei Fan was several levels ahead of Hu Yen in terms of scheming ability and coping ability. Until now, Hu Yen was still thinking about how to get information about the Church of the Divine Blood from the Freedom Courtyard. He had not even thought about the other party's plan, which was to transfer them out of Shunning City from the very beginning. But in the future, Hu Yen still had to carry the banner of the King of the Northern Frontier. Lin Yuan did not want to reveal the reason in front of everyone. He had to save some face for Hu Yen. "Yes." Hu Yen cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan and bowed his head in response. Seeing that Hu Yen had accepted the task, Lin Yuan only nodded slightly, then turned and left. After walking for about 300 miles, Lin Yuan suddenly stopped, the coldness in his eyes growing stronger. He lowered his voice and said, "Come out. Do you want this king to drag you out one by one?" As his voice fell, an old man in a green robe walked out from behind a huge tree with his hands behind his back. He looked at the vigilant Lin Yuan and licked his lip. He sneered and said, "Lord Dragon King, my old ancestor invites you to come with me." His gaze paused on the old man for a moment. Lin Yuan suddenly tilted his head and sneered, "Old demon blood sea, do you think that the Church of the Blood God has the final say in the northern frontier just because you have dealt a heavy blow to the Freedom Courtyard? Who dares to be so presumptuous in this king's territory? If your old ancestor wants to see me, tell him to come to the northern frontier's royal residence to pay me a visit." Old Demon Blood Sea's expression turned cold as he said coldly, "Black Snake, do you really think you are the uncrowned king of the northern frontier after giving you some face? You know nothing of my strength. It is your honor that my old ancestor wants to see you now. If you dare to grumble again, this old man will break your bones and drag you back to the Church of the Blood God." Lin Yuan was silent. Old Demon Blood Sea was a void netherworld realm existence after all. Even during the turbulent times in Beijing in the past, the combat strength that Old Demon Blood Sea displayed could only be ranked at the bottom of the void netherworld realm in the northern frontier. However, after the battle at the Freedom Courtyard, Old Demon Blood Sea had fought 1 against 3, crippling 2 and injuring 1 out of the 3 masters of the Freedom Courtyard. Just this achievement alone gave old Demon Blood C the qualifications to look down on the northern frontier. However, it was only looking down on the northern frontier. This was because what he could do, Yan Xingqi could do as well. After leaving the northern frontier, there were as many experts as there were stars in the sky. Otherwise, a mighty figure like the Ink Abyss who stood at the pinnacle of the desolate demon realm would not have to be trapped in the Hengduan mountain range. However, listening to old Demon Blood River's words, it seemed that he didn't take the unspoken rules of the world seriously at all. To fight Lin Yuan, a monster beast at the Mountain Lord realm, with his Kongming realm cultivation base, not to mention that it would be bad if word got out. Even if it was to prevent those big monster beasts from being provoked, the human side would think of ways to make old Demon Blood River pay the corresponding price. Could it be that the grand ancestor that she mentioned could exempt him from the punishment of this rule? A ridiculous thought rose in Lin Yuan's mind. Immediately after, Lin Yuan shook his head with a smile. If the Church of the Blood God really had such a terrifying power, then there should be a true mighty figure that surpassed the void netherworld realm in their sect. They would not be content with the northern frontier. In the world, where could they not display their strength? Black Snake, I advise you not to have any wishful thinking. The grand ancestor of my sect lost his cultivation due to some matters. Now, his cultivation is about the same as yours, a Heaven's Strength Realm cultivator. However, with so many methods, killing you is still as easy as flipping his hand. Therefore, even if I attack you, the Grand Ancestor can say that it was him who did it. Heaven's Strength Realm against a Mountain Lord. Who can pick a Heaven's Strength Realm cultivator? Old Demon Blood C shook his neck and sneered. Black Snake, if you know what's good for you, then come with me obediently. Otherwise, you will suffer some pain for no reason. I'll say the same thing again. The northern frontier is this king's territory. If your grand ancestor wants to see this king, then tell him to come to the northern frontier king's residence to pay him a visit. This king has a lot of things on hand, so he has no time to mess around with you. Lin Yuan's expression did not change. He moved around old Demon Blood C and headed in the direction of Shunning City again. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Old Demon Blood C's expression changed. With a wave of his right hand, a huge hand completely made of blood condensed out of thin air. Then, it directly grabbed at Lin Yuan who was flying. It seemed that he really intended to break the unspoken rule and deal with Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan, who was flying, turned his head with a mocking look in his eyes. Chapter 393. Clang. A crisp sound reverberated from the forest. Before the huge bloody claw could reach Lin Yuan, a cold light flew over at an even faster speed and instantly pierced through the bloody claw. Then, the bloody claw paused for a moment before it shattered into pieces, turning into a rain of blood that fell from the sky. I was wondering who it was. Is it Zhu Jianxian, who is at the peak of the Heaven Star Border realm? Old Demon Blood C's move was broken, but he didn't panic at all. There was even a hint of mockery in his eyes. It was as though Xian was just a weak existence that wasn't worth mentioning in his eyes. Boom! Another loud sound was heard. More than 10 disciples of the Church of the Blood God flew out and smashed through several huge trees before they landed. However, when they landed, they were already out of breath and their bodies were distorted. It was obvious that they couldn't be saved. Ao Qian from the West Sea Dragon Palace. Old Demon Blood C pointed out the identity of the attacker once again and sneered. I didn't even take Zhu Jianxian, who is at the peak of the Heaven Star Border realm, seriously. What's the difference if there's a dragon bloodline demonic beast at the level 4 Mountain Lord realm? However, our Lord Dragon King is quite scheming. He has 2 such hidden guards by his side, and his battle prowess is quite impressive as well. If it weren't for a Void Realm cultivator, there wouldn't be anyone in the entire north who could do anything to you, right? At this point, he looked at Lin Yuan condescendingly. He licked his lips and sneered. It's a pity that you don't understand how big the gap is between the Heaven Star Border realm and the Kongming realm. Shui Yen and Chen Guanshan walked out and paused on Old Demon Blood Sea for a moment. Then, they cupped their hands at Lin Yuan and said, Sir Shifter Emperor, when we received the notice from the Association of the Shifter Emperor, we had already left. Now we're not too late. Old Demon Blood Sea's expression changed slightly when he heard the title of Shifter Emperor. There was indeed a demon court in ancient times, but the Patriarch's cultivation was greatly damaged and he couldn't see Lin Yuan's background at all. He could only roughly deduce that Lin Yuan was indeed related to the existence that established the ancient demon court. Even if it was very weak, it involved the demon court. Even the Patriarch had to be careful when dealing with it. Otherwise, without an ancient remnant as a primer, they would have already attacked Lin Yuan, who was suspected of being an ancient remnant. Sir Shifter Emperor, my Patriarch has no ill intentions towards you. It's just that this matter is confidential, so I have no choice but to invite you to the sect of the Blood God. I can guarantee that the sect of the Blood God is definitely not an enemy of the demon court. If you're willing to cooperate with us, the Patriarch will naturally give Sir Shifter Emperor a great opportunity. Old Demon Blood Sea's expression turned slightly ugly when he thought of the Patriarch's attitude when he mentioned the ancient demon court. He couldn't even call out the black snake that was at the tip of his tongue. He could only use the title of Shifter Emperor to communicate with Lin Yuan properly. Lin Yuan glanced at Old Demon Blood Sea and said indifferently, Do you want me to repeat what I said before for the third time? Lin Yuan was an astute existence. From Old Demon Blood Sea's reaction, he could guess that he and the Patriarch behind him were very afraid of the existence of the ancient demon court. If it was in the past, Lin Yuan would have felt a little guilty. However, after meeting Zhenhai in the secret realm and obtaining the things in the palace, Lin Yuan was certain of the existence of the ancient demon court. Even the powerful dragon palace of the Four Seas was just a small branch of the demon court back then. Whether it was Lin Yuan's origin or bloodline, no one could find fault with him claiming to be a member of the demon court. Even if Lin Yuan claimed to be the Shifter Emperor, the remnant forces of the ancient demon court wouldn't feel disgusted. After all, even the ancient demon court had been destroyed. They definitely didn't have the guts to rebuild the demon court. However, if a junior was willing to shoulder the burden, they wouldn't mind showing some goodwill to Lin Yuan. After all, once the demon court became a reality, the remnant forces of the ancient demon court would more or less give him some face. At the very least, it could change the terrible situation of the demonic beasts being reared by humans in the Tianwu continent and slaughtered as livestock. Old Demon Blood Sea choked on Lin Yuan's words. He almost couldn't suppress the coldness in his eyes. He could only say coldly, Are you determined to embarrass my Patriarch? Seeing that Lin Yuan didn't say anything, Old Demon Blood Sea sneered and said with a gloomy face, If that's the case, then I can only offend the Lord Shifter Emperor today. Old Demon Blood Sea's evaluation in the Patriarch's heart had dropped a lot since he failed to collect the bloodline of the ancient Demon Blood Sea. If he failed the mission of capturing Lin Yuan, the Patriarch definitely wouldn't be able to kill him with his current cultivation. However, the Patriarch definitely wouldn't pass on the Divine Blood Church's cultivation techniques that had been lost over the years to him. Therefore, his thoughts of breaking through to the Dao accessing realm or even the supremacy realm would naturally become nothing. Everyone's expression didn't look too good. This was because the strongest existence among them was Jiu Jianxian. The rest of them were around level 3 or level 4. It wouldn't be much of a problem for them to deal with the disciples of the Divine Blood Church. However, they didn't see any chance of winning against the Void Realm Old Demon Blood Sea. If you want to fight, then do it. What's with the chatter? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes fell on Old Demon Blood Sea. There wasn't even a trace of emotion in his tone. It was as if the situation was still under his control. After all, until now, he still had a trump card that he hadn't revealed. He used the name of the ancient demon court because he felt that it wasn't worth it to expose his alliance with Yan Xingqi over such a small matter. However, since the Divine Blood Church was so aggressive, he naturally couldn't back down. Old Demon Blood See, you better think carefully. If you want to fight, you have to kill us all. However, if I die in this broken place, the northern frontier, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas will definitely not let go of your bullshit Divine Blood Church. Under the command of my father, the Dragon Palace of the West Sea will come out in full force. Even the Shunwu dynasty won't dare to stop them. Before Lin Yuan revealed his trump card, Ao Qian's cold voice had already sounded. Everyone, including Lin Yuan, widened their eyes and looked at Ao Qian in disbelief. Although the two missions that Ao Qian had received were easy missions with many merits, Lin Yuan guessed that Ao Qian's identity wasn't simple. However, he didn't expect Ao Qian's father to be the Dragon Lord of the Dragon Palace of the West Sea. How tyrannical was the Dragon Lord of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas? As long as it was a human empire near the sea, no one would dare to provoke the demon beasts of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Moreover, the Dragon Lord of the Dragon Palace of the West Sea was behind her, the true Dragon King with unfathomable power. Oh my, this background was a little too big. Chapter 394. Hearing Ao Qian's self-introduction, Old Demon Blood Sea's expression became extremely interesting. His eyes paused on Ao Qian for a moment before he sighed faintly and said, Ao Qian, the sect of the Blood God is also a sect that has been passed down since ancient times. Although it has nothing to do with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, my ancestor was not afraid of the Dragon Lord of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas when he was at his peak. Today, I can let you live, but after you leave, you must keep what happened today to yourself. Otherwise, my ancestor will not let you have a good time in the future. The Dragon Clan was an extremely powerful race of demonic beasts. However, because of their terrifying talent and strength, the probability of giving birth to offspring was extremely small. In order to protect the existence of the clan, the Dragon Clan would crazily reproduce. That was why there were so many dragon bloodline demonic beasts. There was even a legend that the Dragon Clan was lustful by nature. But in fact, these problems were only caused by the low fertility of the Dragon Clan. If they did not work hard, the Dragon Clan might even disappear from the world naturally. Even if the Dragon King of the West Sea had more than one child, he would never tolerate Ao Qian dying in the hands of others. If Ao Qian really died in the northern frontier, the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, who were closely related to each other, would not sit by and do nothing. By then, the entire northern frontier would be destroyed by the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. Even if the Shunwu dynasty was dissatisfied, they would not dare to stop the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. The Shunwu dynasty could only shamelessly ask for peace with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. The Shuangjian and Qinjiang empires were still fighting with the Shunwu dynasty. It was worth mentioning that more than 2 months ago, Lei Qiusheng met with the emissaries of the Shuangjian and Qinjiang empires. However, no one knew what the emissaries said to Lei Qiusheng. Lei Qiusheng directly flew into a rage in the imperial court. He did not even care about the rule of not killing emissaries when 2 armies were at war. He directly killed the 2 emissaries on the spot, chopped off their heads, and sent them back to the borders of various empires. The important ministers and nobles in the imperial capital were also silent about this matter. No matter how much effort the Demon Emperor Association used, they could not pry open anyone's mouth. Ao Qian, we don't have to go to this extent, right? Old Demon Blood Sea's tone stiffened. He said helplessly, although this black snake has great potential, it belongs to the Hengduan mountain range. According to my information, Beast Lord Kirin even wants to make it the next Beast Lord. Do you think the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas can still win over this black snake's loyalty? Old Demon Blood Sea was speaking the truth. Lin Yuan's name was well known in the beast world. Let alone the dragon palace of the Four Seas, which was a dragon bloodline beast like Lin Yuan. Even if Beast Lord Kirin went into seclusion and did not come out, the three great beast kings that ruled the Beast Imperial Court on behalf of the Beast King were still trying to get on good terms with Lin Yuan. This was not only because Lin Yuan could bring them great benefits, but also because of the terrifying aptitude that Lin Yuan had displayed. In just over a year, Lin Yuan had grown from a wild beast to a mountain lord. Let alone the demonic beasts that were usually slow in cultivation, even the self-proclaimed spiritualists among the demonic beasts would not be able to compare with Lin Yuan in terms of cultivation speed. It could even be said that as long as Lin Yuan did not die prematurely from some people's wanton attacks or accidents, there would definitely be no problem for him to become the pillar of the beast race in the future. However, Lin Yuan was already tied down by the Hengduan mountain range. The spiritual item business of the northern frontier still required the support of the Hengduan mountain range's demonic beasts. Even the development of the northern frontier could not be done without the protection of the Hengduan mountain range's demonic beasts. The Hengduan mountain range was also willing to pay a heavy price. The news of Lin Yuan as a candidate for the Beast Lord had already spread like wildfire. In addition to Lin Yuan's performance and aptitude, once Lin Yuan had enough influence or strength, he would definitely become the next Beast Lord. What about the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas? What could they offer to attract Lin Yuan? Could it be that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, which had the existence of true dragons, would allow Lin Yuan, a dragon bloodline beast with a mixed bloodline, to squeeze out those true dragon descendants with noble bloodlines and become the new Dragon King of the Four Seas? Even if the current Dragon King had this idea, those true dragon descendants would not agree, right? In other words, old Demon Blood Sea was reminding Ao Qian not to use the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas reputation to pressure him because of a demonic beast loyal to the Hengduan mountain range. Otherwise, if they really fell out, the Divine Blood Church would be destroyed. However, on land, the demonic beasts of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would not be able to come and go as freely as they did in the sea. When the time came, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would definitely have to pay a heavy price. What was the point of doing something that would not benefit anyone? Old Demon Blood Sea, we haven't seen each other for a few days, but it feels like 3 years have passed. Master Kuan, who was wearing a yellow monk robe, flew over and looked down at old Demon Blood Sea. The ruthlessness in his eyes became more intense as he coldly said, "Last time, you succeeded in your sneak attack, and I had to split my attention to take care of my 2 senior brothers. Today, you want to attack Lord Dragon King of the Northern Frontier outside my Freedom Courtyard's mountain gate. Do you really think my Freedom Courtyard is easy to bully?" When enemies met, their eyes blazed with hatred. Although Master Kuan could not wait for Lin Yuan to die, compared to old Demon Blood Sea, who had crippled 2 of his Freedom Courtyard's legs, the conflict between him and Lin Yuan was insignificant. After all, the Freedom Courtyard was going to move out of the northern frontier. How the northern frontier viewed them and how their reputation looked did not matter. Moreover, if they wanted to leave the northern frontier safely, they had to curry favor with Lin Yuan. If Lin Yuan died near the Freedom Courtyard, who would let them have an easy time in the northern frontier's Wang Mansion and the Demon Emperor's Association? Kuan, if you were in your best condition, I would still respect you. However, you have not recovered from your serious injuries, and you still dare to provoke me. Aren't you looking down on me too much? Besides, if I remember correctly, not long ago your Freedom Courtyard was humiliated by this black snake. Why are you suddenly turning around and acting like this black snake's dog? The Church of the Blood God was an existence that was neither good nor evil in the northern frontier. Usually, they did not get along with the Freedom Courtyard, which considered itself the leader of the righteous path. Ao Qian alone was enough to give old Demon Blood Sea a headache. Now, Kuan from the Freedom Courtyard had come. Old Demon Blood Sea no longer had much hope in taking away Lin Yuan. If it were not for the fact that the situation was still under control and he could still deal with the cultivators who had gathered here because of Lin Yuan, he might have already turned around and left. Forget it. I won't argue with a bald donkey like you. If you have any tricks, just use them. I must take away this black snake today. Whoever dares to stop me will die. Chapter 395. As soon as Old Demon Blood Sea's voice fell, blood gushed out from all the acupuncture points on his body. In just 2 breaths of time, a sea of blood had already gathered around Old Demon Blood Sea. Figures completely made of blood crawled out of the sea of blood. When their eyes fell on the crowd, they all rushed towards them like wild dogs that had been let loose. They held weapons made of blood in their hands. However, no one present doubted whether these weapons made of blood had any lethality. Instead, after smelling the almost choking smell of blood, they all covered their mouths and noses and began to retreat tacitly. Jiu Jianxian could break a blood hand, but how could a group of Heaven Dipper realm cultivators like them contend with Old Demon Blood Sea's all-out attack? Therefore, they didn't even discuss it and directly gave the battlefield to Master Kuan, who came later. Petty tricks are not worth mentioning. Master Kuan didn't retreat. He just waved his hand and golden light suddenly danced from the big sleeve of his yellow monk robe. The golden light fell on the blood people, and the latter immediately convulsed. Then, they turned back into blood and sank into the sea of blood on the ground. In just a moment, Master Kuan had killed thousands of blood people. However, for the sea of blood that was still constantly creating blood people, it was no different from pouring a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Old bald donkey, you've always been at odds with me in the northern region. In the past, I had no choice but to hide my strength in order to protect the ancestor. This time, I'd like to see how you're going to block my attack. After I kill you, old bald donkey, I'll personally go to the Freedom Courtyard and kill all the little bald donkeys in your courtyard one by one. I'll refine all of you into my blood puppets. Old Demon Blood Sea's messy hair moved without wind. When his eyes fell on Master Kuan's face, he no longer had the good attitude he had when talking to Lin Yuan. After all, Lin Yuan had the demon court behind him, and Ao Qian had the dragon palace of the 4 seas behind her. They were all existences that the sect of the Blood God could not afford to offend. Even if Old Demon Blood Sea was dissatisfied, he could only suppress his temper and have a good chat. However, Old Demon Blood Sea naturally didn't have a good temper when facing his old enemy, Master Kuan. Buddha's illumination. Master Kuan put his palms together and rose into the air. When he disappeared into the clouds, rays of golden light shrouded the blood sea below. The visions released by the 2 Nethervoid realm experts collided and constantly melted each other. For a moment, it was impossible to tell who was at a disadvantage. Whoosh! At this moment, a blood-red whip suddenly extended from the blood sea and went straight for Master Kuan, who was in the air. Master Kuan was still holding his palms together as he looked at Old Demon Blood River with an indifferent expression. However, no one noticed that just from the collision of the 2 avatars, Master Kuan's forehead was covered with beads of cold sweat the size of soybeans. It was just like when he had been suppressed by the fire Kirin during his battle with the Kirin. In Lin Yuan's impression, this leader of Shi sect, whose name was known throughout the northern frontier, had never won against cultivators or demons of the same level. Every time, he was completely suppressed by his opponent. Lin Yuan, if you have any tricks up your sleeves, use them as soon as possible. This poor monk has yet to recover from his serious injuries. I can only delay him for a while. Master Kuan saw that the blood-red whip was getting closer and closer to him, so he couldn't care less about his demeanor. After all, it wasn't the first time he had been humiliated in front of Lin Yuan. Especially today, Master Kuan had yet to recover from his injuries. In order to protect the black snake, he had hurriedly come here. He didn't expect old Demon Blood River to be so decisive. He directly attacked with all his strength, as if he wouldn't give up until he took away Lin Yuan. When Master Kuen's voice fell, a cold light suddenly flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes. Immediately after, the blood-red whip that was smashing towards Master Kuen was instantly frozen and solidified, turning into a blood-red icicle. Then, inch by inch, it shattered into fine powder and slowly fell from the sky. Old Demon Blood River was slightly stunned. Clearly, he didn't expect his attack to be broken so suddenly. His gaze paused on Lin Yuan for a moment. When he saw that the light in Lin Yuan's eyes had dimmed, he sneered. To be able to break the technique of a Void Realm expert with your cultivation as a Mountain Lord, as expected of the successor of the Demon Court. However, that blood-red whip just now was just a casual attack of mine. Black Snake, even if you can break it, how many times can you break it? This old bald donkey can't delay me for long. The same goes for you. At this point, old Demon Blood River clenched his hands and growled, "Why do you have to put up a pointless resistance? As long as you follow me back to the sect of the Blood God, I guarantee that the Patriarch won't make things difficult for you." After the Blood Sea, old demon clenched his fists. The blood around him condensed into two monsters that were more than 300 feet tall. They were as ferocious and tall as Titan gods, and they walked toward Lin Yuan. Here. Chen Guanshan raised his eyebrows. His body spun rapidly in midair, and the weapon that resembled the Shuangjin dynasty's scimitar left his hand. It flew straight towards old Demon Blood River's two gigantic blood puppets. Whoosh, the sharp blade destroyed the two blood puppets with irresistible force. However, before it could fly back to Chen Guanshan's hand, the strangely shaped scimitar melted into nothingness in midair. The two blood puppets also condensed from the blood sea when the scimitar melted, appearing in front of everyone once again. I have to attack his main body. Shuiyan narrowed his eyes slightly and muttered with a solemn expression. If Chen Guanshan's scimitar had not been used as an example, Shuiyan might have already charged forward in an attempt to fight the blood puppet. However, when he thought of the tragic state of the scimitar, Shuiyan still shook his head. From time to time, he would throw out some punches to shatter the blood puppets that approached him. However, his footsteps became more and more frequent. The blood sea around old Demon Blood River was poisonous. This was something they had thought of from the beginning. However, no one had expected the blood to have such a terrifying corrosive ability. Pu Tao. Jiu Jianxian narrowed his eyes and secretly formed a sword seal with his right hand. In the next moment, a red longsword flew over from afar with a halo trailing behind it. It stabbed straight at old Demon Blood River, who was standing in the middle of the blood sea. However, old Demon Blood River only curled his lips in disdain. The blood sea in front of him surged and immediately raised a blood wall in front of him. Jiu Jianshuan's longsword landed on the blood wall but was unable to advance even an inch. It was as though the blood wall was the hardest thing in the world. Jiu Jianxian, who was at the peak of the Heavenly Dipper realm, could easily kill cultivators of the same realm. However, when facing old Demon Blood River, he was like a helpless child. Chapter 396. Old Demon Blood Sea's power was boundless, directly suppressing the experts on Lin Yuan's side to the point of suffering. From time to time, Chen Guanshan would even glance at Master Kuen, who was controlling the golden light to clash with Blood Sea. He was secretly wondering if this Buddhist cultivator had used his full strength. Old Demon Blood Sea had been suppressing them as much as he wanted with a stance that could crush everyone. However, Master Kuen had yet to show any impressive moves up to this point. Master Kuen also seemed to feel that he was slacking a little too much. His eyes narrowed as he chanted Buddha's name. A golden glaring Vajra image suddenly appeared and fell heavily from the air. The blood puppets on the ground didn't even have the slightest ability to resist. They were pressed back into blood water and fell back into the blood sea. Demon suppression. Master Kuan had already sat down cross-legged in midair. He put his palms together and closed his eyes. He kept chanting the demon suppression scripture. Golden Sanskrit characters kept condensing around Master Kuan and then imprinting into the Vajra glaring eyes, making the Vajra glaring eyes look even more solid and huge. Moreover, under the suppression of the glaring Vajra form, the boundless sea of blood released by old demon blood sea began to show signs of flowing backward for the first time. The sea of blood that was spreading in all directions retracted bit by bit towards old demon blood sea. It was not until now that everyone reacted. It turned out that Master Kuan was not a powerful Buddhist cultivator who could kill demons and exorcise evil in a single blow. This guy's fighting style was just like his name. He had to slowly chant the scripture to gradually show his power. Only then did they understand why the 3 Kongming realm cultivators from the Freedom Compound would be crippled and one heavily injured by Old Demon Blood Sea. It was because Old Demon Blood Sea's combat style restrained them. Before they could finish chanting the sutra, Old Demon Blood Sea had already succeeded in his sneak attack and left. This was probably the reason why Old Demon Blood Sea chose to attack the Freedom Courtyard instead of the Broken Moon House and the Green Lotus Sword sect. Old Demon Blood Sea, who had obediently lowered his head and served as a lackey in the northern region for so many years, naturally knew the fighting style of his sworn enemies the best. Otherwise, he would not have been able to become a void netherworld realm cultivator in Shilyan City, who had reached the peak of cultivation on the surface. Blood Demon Protection. Old Bald Donkey, I want to see how you're going to subdue me, the Blood Demon. Seeing that Blood Sea was at a disadvantage, Old Demon Blood Sea decided to stop fighting Master Kuan. The blood and blood water gathered on Old Demon Blood Sea's body, instantly condensing into an extremely grotesque armor. However, Old Demon Blood Sea transformed into a sanguine beam as he charged straight for the glowering Vajra. The blood-red light flashed across the glaring Vajra statue, and in the next moment, the glaring Vajra statue collapsed. Master Kuan, who was in the sky, finally could not hold his breath and directly fell down. I'll kill you first. Old Demon Blood Sea roared as he watched Master Kuan fall continuously. He really couldn't touch Lin Yuan and Ao Qian. He had been suppressing his anger for a long time, so he simply vented it all on Master Kuan at this moment. His actions were also incomparably ruthless. Senior, please make a move. Following closely was Lin Yuan's voice. Whoosh. In the next moment, a silver light flew out from the forest and directly hit Old Demon Blood Sea, who had just left his territory and leaped toward Master Kuan. Boom! A muffled sound was heard. Old Demon Blood Sea was unable to dodge in time. He was sent flying to the side by the silver beam of light. After smashing through more than 10 huge trees, he slammed heavily into a mountain wall and slowly slid to the ground. Yan Xingqi walked out of the forest expressionlessly. When his gaze landed on Old Demon Blood Sea, a look of contempt flashed across his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "If I wasn't still alive, I would have thought that there was no one in the northern frontier. How could I tolerate a piece of trash like you jumping around for so long? So you've been hiding your cultivation all these years." Speaking of this, Yan Xingqi gently clapped his hands and said contemptuously, "But that's all. A piece of trash is still a piece of trash. There's no difference." Old Demon Blood Sea's figure had just landed on the ground when he pulled out the silver halberd that was nailed into his shoulder. He growled at Yan Xingqi, "Yan Xingqi, why does everything have to do with you? What does my conflict with the Freedom Courtyard have to do with you, the guardian of the northern frontier?" Although Old Demon Blood Sea's tone was firm, when Master Kuan appeared, Old Demon Blood Sea did not even hesitate to attack Master Kuan. Now that he was hit by Yan Xingqi's sneak attack, he could only show off his might verbally. From this, it could be seen that Old Demon Blood Sea was still quite afraid of Yan Xingqi. "Of course, your conflict with the Freedom Courtyard has nothing to do with me. But you attacking Master Dragon King has a lot to do with me. Why, is the Church of the Blood Divine so ill-informed that you don't even know that I'm now the chief guest of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion? If you take Master Dragon King away, who will give me my salary? Yan Xingqi crossed his arms in front of his chest and walked towards the mountain wall where old Demon Blood Sea was. He waved his hand in the air and caught the falling Master Kuan. Then, he threw Master Kuan onto a rock to rest. From the beginning to the end, Yan Xingqi did not stop walking. Storing power. Zhu Jianxian narrowed his eyes and said slowly. As a former royal of the Wanjian dynasty, Zhu Jianxian had some understanding of this famous general of the dynasty. Before the change of dynasty, Yan Xingqi had the combat power to walk from the military camp to the front of the enemy's formation. He then casually killed the enemy's general before turning back to the camp. Storing power was Yan Xingqi's killer move. With every step he took, the aura around his body grew heavier. Under the pressure of this aura, it would be extremely difficult for his opponent to even move. When Yan Xingqi made his move, his strength and aura would be intertwined together. Without one or two life-saving methods, it would be very difficult to withstand Yan Xingqi's attack that had been accumulated to its peak. In addition, Yan Xingqi's aura was invincible. He had only lost once in his life. He lost to Lei Qiuxing in the speed of returning to the imperial capital. When he arrived at the imperial capital, the Wanjian dynasty had already changed hands. Under the pressure of Lei Qiuxing, Zhu Xinghai had already drafted the letter of succession. Therefore, Yan Xingqi was sent to the bitter cold land of the northern frontier. He had been in seclusion for dozens of years. If it wasn't for Lin Yuan's sudden appearance, this northern frontier guardian might have been buried in the northern frontier. Chapter 397. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Yan Xingqi approached Old Demon Blood River step by step. His cold eyes were filled with killing intent. Now that the northern frontier was under Lin Yuan's rule, everything was progressing in an orderly manner. If anyone wanted to stir up trouble in the northern frontier at this time, old General Yan would kill them regardless of whether they were human or ghost. Yan Xingqi, you dare to kill me? Seeing that Yan Xingqi was getting closer and closer to him, the Blood Sea Demon also lost his initial arrogance. His face was ashen as he looked at Yan Xingqi, whose killing intent was getting stronger and stronger. His facial features became distorted and ferocious, as if he didn't believe that Yan Xingqi, who had been guarding the northern region for many years and hated demonic beasts, would kill him for Lin Yuan. Yan Xingqi narrowed his eyes slightly. His footsteps were still as steady as ever. With a gentle wave of his right hand, the silver halberd that Old Demon Blood River had thrown to the side turned into a silver stream of light and returned to Yan Xingqi's hand. Old Demon Blood River's ferocious blood armor made of blood was not weak. Even Master Kuan's glaring Vajra form, which he condensed after abandoning his own defense, was destroyed by the blood armor. However, after being hit by Yan Xingqi's halberd, the blood armor was already in tatters. It was as if it would turn back into blood and flow away from his body at any time. Holding the halberd, Yan Xingqi walked up to Old Demon Blood River and sneered. I'm curious. Why don't I dare to kill you? Because you're ugly or because you're weak? If you dare to touch me, my patriarch will not let you go. Old Demon Blood Sea tried to struggle, but he was unable to move under the pressure of Yan Xingqi's aura. All he could do was roar at Yan Xingqi. However, anyone could tell that Old Demon Blood Sea was terrified to the extreme. After all, when Yan Xingqi was still serving the 10,000 Sword Dynasty, he was known for his massacre. From the nobles to the commoners, there was no existence that Yan Xingqi did not dare to kill. Especially someone like Old Demon Blood River, who knew what Yan Xingqi hated the most but still did it anyway. As long as he fell into Yan Xingqi's hands, nothing good would come out of it. You're almost 100 years old, yet you keep calling me ancestor. Aren't you ashamed? Yan Xingqi frowned slightly and said with a cold face, let's not talk about the origin of your ancestor. Even if he is the reincarnation of the founder of the sect of the Blood God, he should start all over again. Not everyone can avoid the heavenly way. Besides, even if he has the ability to avoid the heavenly way, he should learn to be a human when he reaches the northern frontier. To me, the dragon has to coil and the tiger has to hold. Looking at old Demon Blood River, who had curled up into a ball and was shivering, Yan Xingqi lowered his eyes. Suddenly, he no longer had any killing intent. He felt that killing old Demon Blood Sea in such a state was equivalent to dirtying his hands. However, Yan Xingqi was a little interested in the ancestor that old Demon Blood River mentioned. After all, no matter how weak he was, his Kongming realm cultivation was still there. Not to mention the northern frontier, even in the entire Shenwu dynasty, old Demon Blood River's talent and temperament should be among the best. What was the origin of this ancestor? How could he play old Demon Blood River in the palm of his hand? He could even make old Demon Blood River violate some taboos to do things for him. Until now, old Demon Blood River was still stubbornly mentioning his ancestor. It was as if Yan Xingqi was nothing in the eyes of this ancestor. It's just a bluff. Lin Yuan's voice slowly sounded. He said with a calm expression, if the ancestor behind him really has the ability to reach the heavens, why would he need to scheme in the dark? Looking at the history of the northern region over the past few decades, although the northern region now has the most potential, it is also the weakest. Look at this old thing. That nuisance of an ancestor has probably been by his side for a long time, but even now, he still doesn't dare to directly attack. This indirectly proves that the other party is incomparably weak at the moment. Old Demon Blood River previously said that his ancestor's cultivation was damaged and he was only in the Heaven Star Border realm. Although there weren't many Heaven Star Border realm cultivators in the world, they were definitely not rare. However, all the famous forces in the pugilistic world basically had a few Heaven Star Border realm cultivators in charge. In the southern region of the Shenwu dynasty, only Heaven Star Border realm cultivators had the qualifications to join the government offices in places larger than county towns and villages. Therefore, although Lin Yuan set up the southern expedition, he didn't have any plans to go down south. Firstly, the foundation of the northern frontier hadn't been set up properly. There were many things waiting to be done, and the various industries had just started to reform. If he continued to expand his territory, it would mean that Lin Yuan would need more resources to invest. This would make the northern frontier prince's residence, which wasn't rich to begin with, even worse. Secondly, if he wanted to take over the territory in the south, with the current combat strength of the northern frontier, it was a complete joke. Even after rummaging through the entire northern frontier, the prince's residence and the association of the Demon Emperor couldn't gather a set of Heaven Star Border realm cultivators. Although they occupied a large territory, Lin Yuan's actual strength in the northern frontier wasn't much stronger than the aristocratic families. It was only because he had the banner of the Shenwu dynasty that the sects in the northern frontier admitted defeat and didn't dare to go head-to-head with Lin Yuan. However, it was precisely under such circumstances that the old ancestor behind old Demon Blood Sea wanted to scheme against Lin Yuan while hiding himself in the dark, leaving all the errands to old Demon Blood Sea. If it wasn't because this so-called old ancestor was too weak, then there must be some unspeakable reason behind it. Let me ask you a question. Lin Yuan wriggled his body to old Demon Blood Sea's side and said indifferently, is your old ancestor a cripple? Does he let you do everything? You keep talking about how your ancestor is, as if we're all chickens and dogs that can't be brought to the table. Then, what about your ancestor? This, old Demon Blood Sea was slightly taken aback. Clearly, he hadn't caught up with Lin Yuan's train of thought, but he still subconsciously said, my old ancestor has other plans. How can ordinary people like you understand? As the old ancestor's lackey, it's my duty to be busy for him. Black Snake, my old ancestor is giving the demon court some face by letting me come and have a discussion with you. How dare you insult my old ancestor? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said contemptuously, Isn't your old ancestor still waiting for this king at the blood god Sek's mountain gate with great arrogance? Don't tell me your old ancestor has a bunch of lackeys like you? TSK, TSK, TSK. It seems like your position isn't very stable. Chapter 398. Old Demon Blood Sea's face turned red, but he didn't say a word. He turned his head to the side, as if he was at Lin Yuan's disposal. Chen Guanshan sneered and said in a deep voice, It seems that this guy is quite loyal to his old ancestor. No. Lin Yuan cast a sidelong glance at the blood demon old ancestor and said indifferently, If this guy is loyal to his old ancestor, he wouldn't talk about the old ancestor hiding behind the scenes. Compared to loyalty, their relationship is more like mine and the association of the Demon Emperor. They want to get something from me, so they are loyal to me. Once I don't have enough things to feed the wolves of the association of the Demon Emperor, they will swarm me and swallow me whole. Speaking of this, Lin Yuan paused and deliberated for a moment before continuing. He is stubborn now only because he has a grudge against us. If he has the information we want to know, although he will suffer a little, he won't immediately lose his life. Maybe things will take a turn for the better. Few cultivators who could reach the Kongming realm were fools. Old Demon Blood Sea had endured in the northern frontier for so many years without revealing anything, so he wouldn't be so arrogant now. If it wasn't for the fact that he was facing Lin Yuan, the Black Water Dragon King, who had never been defeated since he was born, Old Demon Blood Sea wouldn't be so arrogant. He kept talking about the old ancestor, but in fact it was a performance of a guilty conscience. Once he couldn't beat Lin Yuan's arrangement, he could use the old ancestor's secret to exchange for enough time and a chance to live. Jiu Jianxian took off the wine gourd at his waist and took a sip. He flicked his fingertips, and 12 flying swords shuttled back and forth in the forest, killing the disciples of the Church of the Blood God brought by Old Demon Blood Sea one by one. After confirming that there were no more survivors, Jiu Jianxian sheathed his sword and drank all the wine in the gourd. He said in a deep voice, If the Demon Emperor has no other orders, this old man will go back to get more wine. Jiu Jianxian was silent for a moment. Seeing that Lin Yuan didn't say anything, he tied the gourd to his waist again, and then flew up on his sword, flying in the direction of Shunning City. Kid, don't you think that the members of the Association of the Demon Emperor under your command have been a little strange recently? I don't know what they are busy with mysteriously, and even the supervision of the northern frontier has slackened a little. Yan Xingqi's SSS side's attention. The association of the Demon Emperor was quite strange recently. Every move of the Church of the Blood God should be under the control of the association of the Demon Emperor. Yan Xingqi used his authority in the northern frontier to check the recent reports about the Church of the Blood God. About half a month ago, the spies who infiltrated the Church of the Blood God had lost contact. There was no news sent back, and there was no contact with the members of the association of the Demon Emperor. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. However, the association of the Demon Emperor didn't seem to think that this was inappropriate. This also meant that the association of the Demon Emperor didn't know what the Church of the Blood God had done in the past half a month, let alone the others. Otherwise, Lin Yuan wouldn't have been transferred to the mountain gate of the Freedom Yard and killed by Old Demon Blood Sea today. Although he didn't have any intention of controlling the association of the Demon Emperor, as a former general, Yan Xingqi knew very well that when two armies were at war, the most important thing was food and fodder, and the second most important thing was information. Now, they had been blinded by the enemy before the war had even begun. If Lin Yuan hadn't been cautious and had been kidnapped by old demon Blood Sea, who knew what would have happened? Moreover, there was no information for half a month. Did no one feel that something was wrong, and no one reported it? Did they just let the association of the demon emperor shelve the intelligence work of the Church of the Blood God? It's more than a little strange. It's just that I don't have any evidence, so I can't do anything to him. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he murmured, I hope it's not what I've guessed. Otherwise, there will be internal turmoil in the association of the demon emperor. Let's see how it goes first. Seeing that Lin Yuan already had some speculations, Yan Xingqi didn't say anything else. He knew that the two were currently in a cooperative relationship, and cooperation was cooperation. If one party interfered too much with the other party's affairs, it would undoubtedly make the other party unhappy. Just like how Lin Yuan never asked how Yan Xingqi could help him stabilize his rule in the northern frontier, Yan Xingqi only gave Lin Yuan a small reminder. Clap, clap. Yan Xingqi suddenly clapped his hands. Immediately, from the forest he walked out of, a middle-aged man with a determined expression and wheat-colored skin, and a young man with a jade-like face and starry eyes slowly walked out. The middle-aged man was wearing a silver armor, and his hair was shaved very short. Compared to his bald head, he only had a little stubble. The young man was wearing a blue brocade robe. Although Lin Yuan had never seen him before, his slightly drooping triangular eyes were emitting a gloomy aura. The one wearing the armor is my old subordinate, Gao Buzhen. The young man is the son of another old subordinate, Li Zhong. He also has a younger brother named Li Xian, but his younger brother is still studying and can't come to the northern frontier. When they came, they also brought you a flag and 5,000 of my old subordinate. Yan Xingqi waved his hand. Gao Buzhen immediately strode forward to Lin Yuan, reached out his hand and pulled out a flag with white characters on a green background and handed it to Lin Yuan. He said in a deep voice, "The champion of the original Fallen Star Army, Gao Buzhen, reports to Lord Dragon King." This, Lin Yuan looked at Yan Xingqi and said in a deep voice, "Senior, isn't this too expensive?" The Fallen Star Army was the designation of Yan Xingqi's old army. Together with Lei Qiusheng's Black Thunder Army, they were known as the Two Blades of the Wanjian dynasty. Since the day this army was established, it had never lost a battle. Even after Lei Qiusheng seized the throne, he was not willing to disband this army. Instead, he transferred the members of the Fallen Star Army to different armies. Today, at least one-third of the instructors in the Shenlin Jun dynasty came from the old Fallen Star Army. And because these old Fallen Star Army had a certain amount of authority in the military of the Shenwu dynasty, the designation and organization of the Fallen Star Army were still preserved. However, whether it was the recruitment of soldiers or the upgrading of equipment, the Fallen Star Army would not only recruit 5,000 people. When I gave this army to Lei Qiusheng, he only used it as a spiritual sustenance to appease the old brothers who left the Fallen Star Army. Ask yourself, in today's Shenwu dynasty, how many people still remember the name of the Fallen Star Army? Yan Xingqi sneered and said coldly, "The few empires around us can still stop their children from crying at night when they talk about the Fallen Star Army. But in our country we have completely forgotten about this heroic army, which has sacrificed so much for our country." Chapter 399. Although Yan Xingqi only gave Lin Yuan 5,000 soldiers, it was indeed a generous gift. With the designation of the Fallen Star Army, the army of the northern frontier would be completely integrated into the system of the Shenwu dynasty. In this way, even if someone wanted to reach into the northern frontier, they would have to consider whether the Ministry of War, Shen Linjun, and the old Fallen Star Army soldiers in the imperial capital would be willing or not. Just by sending this flag to the northern frontier, Lin Yuan would have a considerable say in the civil and military system of the Shenwu dynasty. During this period of time, Yan Xingqi had been running around. He only had some free time in the past few days. It was probably because of this. If it was a peaceful era or the turmoil was about to be quelled, Lei Qiusheng, who was not muddle-headed, would never send the flag and designation of the Fallen Star Army to Lin Yuan even if he angered Yan Xingqi's old subordinates. But now, although the Shunwu dynasty's internal and external troubles were gradually calming down, it would still take a long time for the chaos to be completely quelled. In addition, Lin Yuan had set up a new southern expedition in the northern frontier. When Lei Qiusheng was considering how to deal with the northern frontier, he had to think about it. Now that the northern frontier was in a full-scale war with him, the army of the northern frontier, the Hengduan mountain range, and even the demonic beasts of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would come back. The two empires that had just shed all pretense of cordiality not long ago would not let go of this opportunity and wanted to bite off a piece of meat from him. Also, those aristocratic families and powerful families in the south who were watching from the sidelines, as well as the various rebel forces in the Shunwu dynasty, would not miss this carnival. At that time, all the efforts of the Shunwu dynasty during this period of time would be in vain. It was even possible that the Shunwu dynasty would perish because of this. In addition to this designation, Gao Buzhen was also a powerful figure. Not everyone could be the champion general of the Shunwu dynasty. Only those who were the most courageous could be qualified to be the champion general. In the past, the Fallen Star Army led by Yan Xingqi made the nearby empires cry for their parent. Even the demonic beasts in the Hengduan mountain range didn't dare to compete with them. It was enough to show how elite the Fallen Star Army was and how valuable the champion general Gao Buzhen was. Gao Buzhen was a martial artist. When he saw Lin Yuan's gaze fall on him, he slightly lowered his head and didn't take the opportunity to show off. In addition to his calm personality, it was more important that Gao Buzhen came to the northern frontier to give face to his old superior, Lin Yuan. As a demonic beast, Lin Yuan wasn't very likable. In addition, Gao Buzhen had never shown any ability to conquer him. If Gao Buzhen was a normal person, he might try to curry favor with Lin Yuan for the sake of opportunities and progress. However, the former champion general obviously still had some pride that hadn't been obliterated in the past few decades. Thinking about it, how old was Gao Buzhen a few decades ago? In his teens or 20s, he became the champion general of one of the two trump cards of the Wanjian dynasty. How could he not have some pride? Putting aside Yan Xingqi, Lei Qiusheng, and Jiu Xinghai, these three evildoers who stepped into the Heaven Dipper realm in their teens or 20s, Gao Buzhen was definitely an unparalleled evildoer in his generation. It was just that after Lei Qiusheng usurped the throne, Gao Buzhen became depressed. He was afraid that he would arouse the displeasure of the tyrannical monarch and implicate his family. In these few years, his cultivation had not improved at all. However, Gao Buzhen didn't show off. The other normal person cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan and said, "After this student came to the northern frontier, I heard a lot of stories about Lord Dragon King. According to the current situation of the northern frontier, this student has been thinking hard these few days and came up with a plan. I would like to ask Lord Dragon King to give me some advice." A light flashed past Lin Yuan's eyes. Yan Xingqi and Gao Buzhen's faces changed slightly. Obviously, they didn't expect Li Zhong to do this. After all, although Lin Yuan's ruling style in the northern frontier wasn't tyrannical, it was perfect. The rules that he set were rules. Even for someone like Lei Fan, who had a lot of authority in Lin Yuan's camp, after challenging Lin Yuan's authority, he didn't end up well. Now you, a little kid, want to give advice to Lin Yuan? This was no longer taking your own life as a joke. If something went wrong, even Yan Xingqi would be implicated. Lin Yuan also thought so. After all, for Li Zhong to be able to catch Yan Xingqi's eye, there could only be three situations. First, Li Zhong was a real talent. That was why Yan Xingqi invited him to the northern frontier to assist Lin Yuan. It could be considered as giving the descendant of his old subordinate a job that would go down in history. Second, his younger brother, Li Xian, was an extraordinary talent. The reason Yan Xingqi invited Li Zhong was to wait for Li Xian to succeed in his studies before inviting Li Xian to the northern frontier to assist Lin Yuan. Third, this pair of brothers were very powerful. When Li Zhong said that he wanted Lin Yuan to teach him, it was actually because he found a loophole in Lin Yuan's order. He wanted to use this opportunity to show off his skills in front of Lin Yuan. Although Lin Yuan didn't mind this kind of thing, it didn't mean that Lin Yuan was a good-tempered person. If Li Zhong's strategy was nonsense without any merit, Lin Yuan wouldn't mind making him pay the price. Presumably, Li Zhong had a certain degree of confidence in speaking up at this time. Therefore, Lin Yuan really wanted to hear Li Zhong's thoughts. According to what I know, Dragon King has recently defeated the sects in the northern frontier. However, he didn't have any good plans for the division of the sect's businesses. He just handed them over to the advisors in the northern frontier. Dragon King's actions saved him a lot of trouble. However, it is still unknown how much wealth went into the pockets of those who handled the businesses. Although I have observed the style of Dragon King's orders, after defeating the sects, it would be the aristocratic family's turn. After that, the squires and tyrants in various places wouldn't be able to escape. However, I don't think Lord Dragon King needs to make more enemies for himself. First, he needs to restrain those who handle the sect's businesses. Second, it's time for Lord Dragon King to show his edge. Li Zhong's eyes suddenly lit up with a cold light. He said in a deep voice, "Since the sects in the northern frontier fell, only the Divine Blood Church dares to challenge the northern frontier mansion. The rest of the sects have either been wiped out or are selling their businesses and preparing to move out of the northern frontier. The money of the mansion of the northern frontier mansion is used to maintain the development and construction of the northern frontier. Therefore, they didn't participate in the purchase of these sects' businesses. However, those aristocratic families are taking advantage of this opportunity to eat until their mouths are dripping with oil." Interesting. Lin Yuan smiled and didn't interrupt Li Zhong. Instead, he continued to ask, "Then, in your opinion, how should this king show his edge?" To be addressed as "Sir" meant that his words had attracted the attention of the ruler of the northern frontier. Li Zhong was secretly delighted. However, soon, Li Zhong adjusted his emotions and stared at Lin Yuan. Chapter 400. This student believes that if we want to progress further in the northern frontier, we must get rid of the constraints of the sects and aristocratic families. Now that Lord Dragon King has defeated the sects, it will be easy to deal with the aristocratic families next. This is because the aristocratic families don't have any decent legacies, and they don't have the qualifications to open their doors and accept disciples. Although they can hire a lot of servants and guards, they are all exchanged with money, food, and spirit items. If this benefit is cut off, the aristocratic families will instantly become tigers without teeth. The aristocratic family's money, food, and spirit items all come from business, lending, and annexing farmland. This student has observed the Dragon King's previous actions, and it seems that he doesn't want to completely eradicate the aristocratic families. Therefore, after much consideration, I believe that Lord Dragon King must increase the aristocratic family's income in the business field, and at the same time, take back the land they have annexed to the northern frontier. This student doesn't dare to embarrass himself in front of Lord Dragon King when it comes to business, but this student still has some confidence in taking back the land in the aristocratic family's hands. Lord Dragon King can first start the preliminary officials and civilians to reduce the income the aristocratic families can bring in from farming. Now that the northern frontier's business is unprecedentedly developed, the aristocratic families won't fall out with Lord Dragon King over such a small matter. Therefore, this move can be very stable. Li Zhong spoke very slowly, clearly giving Lin Yuan enough time to think. The northern frontier's aristocratic families might have a lot of land in their hands, but that was only for the original 7 cities in the northern frontier. While Lin Yuan was expanding the gathering place, he had planned a series of buildings such as residential areas and business areas. He had even allocated farmland to every household. However, these deeds were still in the hands of the northern frontier's royal residents and were only leased to the citizens. Within 3 years, the northern frontier's harvest would increase by at least 10 times. However, this money and food would enter the pockets of the royal residents in the northern frontier. It had nothing to do with the aristocratic families in the northern frontier. They still had their own land, and some wealthy aristocratic families would purchase some properties from the northern frontier's sex. In addition, when Lin Yuan had just taken over the northern frontier, he had single-handedly controlled the Fey trading operation. It could be said to be a stroke of genius. The assets that the northern frontier's aristocratic families had accumulated over the past 10 years were almost all in Lin Yuan's hands. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the funds to start a series of reforms in the northern frontier. Although he was still struggling to make ends meet, he could at least put the northern frontier on the right track. Compared to Lin Yuan's great situation, the northern frontier's aristocratic families weren't having such a good time. Just by relying on the lands in their hands, they would need to accumulate for 10 years under favorable weather conditions before they could earn back the money that they had invested. However, if they ran a few business deals in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, they could even make up for half a year's income. According to the original laws of the Xinwu dynasty, humans were divided into different levels. If someone was an official in the military and had a certain amount of influence, the taxes that they paid to the empire would be reduced accordingly. This was a strategy to recruit talents for the empire, but at the same time, it was also a strategy to weaken the imperial power. Once a family produced a high-ranking official or great general, the people in the vicinity would think of ways to get close to that person. This was also how the aristocratic families first annexed land. Later on, after the family had a certain amount of capital, they would go through some shady transactions. These aristocratic families would often have a nominal official title. Although they didn't have any real power, they still had the convenience of reducing taxes. This was considered a vicious cycle. After all, when there were too many aristocratic families and the empire didn't have enough money to operate, they had no choice but to sell their official titles in exchange for money and food. These sold official titles would then create a batch of aristocratic families, causing the empire's income to be even lower in the coming year. Li Zhong's officials and citizens referred to making the officials and military personnel pay the same taxes as the commoners. Although this method wouldn't directly reduce the land annexed by the aristocratic families, the annual taxes paid by the aristocratic families would be greatly increased. Furthermore, the nearby farmers wouldn't try to seek refuge with the aristocratic families. If it was in other places, Li Zhong's strategy obviously wouldn't work. This was because the officials and military personnel wouldn't be exempted from taxes and would be under the jurisdiction of the higher-up. It would be very uncomfortable and a large number of talents would be lost. However, it was different in the northern frontier. With the existence of the Northern Frontier Academy, Lin Yuan didn't have to worry about not being able to discover talent. In addition, the aristocratic families in other places would definitely oppose the implementation of this decree. However, it was different in the northern frontier. Right now, the majority of the profits in the northern frontier were in Lin Yuan's personal handling of the Fey trade. Whether the Fey, demonic beast flesh, and even Fey cores in the Hengduan mountain range could enter the northern frontier depended entirely on Lin Yuan's intentions. Compared to this huge profit, the aristocratic families wouldn't value the profits that farming could bring. Li Zhong's plan was like boiling the frog in warm water. When the aristocratic families completely lost interest in farming, the the northern frontier princes' residents would no longer face any resistance if they wanted to take back the northern frontier's land and turn these aristocratic families from powerful clans into existences that relied on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to survive. Although he hadn't communicated with Li Zhong before, Li Zhong was able to come up with this plan. Furthermore, it perfectly fit Lin Yuan's idea of not forcing the aristocratic families to be eradicated, but to let the aristocratic families fall into his control. This son of Yan Xingqi's old subordinate was really something. This is really interesting, but Lin Yuan smiled and said in a deep voice, for the aristocratic families to be able to survive until today, they aren't all short-sighted. If you implement this plan, they will think of ways to find loopholes. If they really can't find any loopholes, they will kill you, the person who is implementing this new policy, and use this to intimidate others who want to implement this policy. Li Zhong smiled faintly and bowed. To be able to achieve great things, this student isn't afraid of death. Dragon King's lesson is right. Those aristocratic families will definitely find loopholes in this plan. Therefore, this student begs Lord Dragon King to let this student be personally in charge of this matter, so that the plan can be modified at any time. Hearing this, Li Zhong knew that his position in the northern frontier was stable. At least in the circle of the northern frontier prince's residence, with Lin Yuan supporting him, he would have a certain amount of authority. Then you will be in charge. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and slowly said, the northern frontier currently has 3 armies, the Northern Battlefront Army, the Southern Expedition Army, and the Northern Frontier Prince's Residence Guards. If we suddenly add the Fallen Star Army, first, it will make people wary. Second, the Northern Frontier really doesn't have enough manpower to expand the army. Therefore, I'll have to trouble Senior Gao and your brothers to protect Li Zhong for a while. Let him smoothly implement the new policy under the pressure of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier. Understood. Gao Chuanjin cupped his fist at Lin Yuan and responded in a muffled voice. Chapter 401. News in the northern frontier had always spread very quickly, especially now that the Shifter Tharch Association was acting as an information broker. Even if it was internal information, as long as Lin Yuan didn't explicitly state that it was strictly confidential, the Shifter Tharch Association would sell it to you as long as you could afford the price. Therefore, a new Mr. came to the Northern Frontier Prince's residence. Furthermore, he had just joined the Northern Frontier Prince's residence and was already in charge of the land clearance project. The so-called land clearance project was to strictly calculate how much land there was in the northern frontier based on the original land area of the Shenwu dynasty, who the land belonged to, and how much food and spiritual items could be produced annually. Although this young man named Li Xian had yet to officially start his work, just based on the project he was in charge of, it was enough for the aristocratic families in the northern frontier to establish him as their #1 enemy. Almost every day and night, there would be people waiting near the northern frontier prince's residence, wanting to see how this Mr. Li looked like. At the same time, they wanted to find out if the land clearance project had started. Did it mean that after Lin Yuan dealt with the sects, he was going to make an example out of the aristocratic families? Back then, when the sects were suppressed by Lin Yuan, the aristocratic families all watched from the sidelines and even wantonly took over the benefits that the sects were supposed to get. However, no one would have thought that the sects in the northern frontier were actually so weak. When Lei Fan led the Northern Frontier Prince's residence and the Shifter Tharch Association to clean up the sects in the northern frontier, none of the top sects had any intention of lending a helping hand. After all, from their point of view, this Lei Fan had just taken over the northern frontier and wanted to kill a bunch of fat sheep to fill his pockets. It was only until the Flying Sun Pavilion fell that the top sects panicked and went to seek the protection of the Freedom Courtyard. However, under Lin Yuan's operation, not only did the Freedom Courtyard fail to protect these sects, they even got themselves into trouble and almost got involved in the conflict between the sects and the aristocratic families. It was also after that time that everyone knew that even a first-rate organization with a void netherworld cultivator could forget about protecting anyone that Lin Yuan wanted. So today, the sects of the northern frontier had completely given up on competing with Lin Yuan. Taking advantage of the fact that Lin Yuan had yet to think about their heads, they all sold off their properties and prepared to move to the south. Only the Divine Blood Church still braced themselves to challenge the Wang Mansion of the northern frontier. Although they didn't openly rebel, the Church of the Blood God had blocked the Repose Courtyard, which was planning to leave the northern frontier. As a result, 2 of the Repose Courtyard's Kongming realm experts were crippled and injured. This was news that everyone knew. Now, the trouble of the Divine Blood Church had not been dealt with yet, but the new government order to clear the land had been issued from the northern frontier Wang Mansion, and it was under the charge of a guy they had never heard of or seen before. Clearly, he didn't plan to show mercy to anyone. This made many cultivators from aristocratic families faintly feel that something was wrong. After all, they had eaten and seen before. There had been rumors in the northern frontier that after Lin Yuan cleaned up the sects, the next step would be to clean up the aristocratic families. It was just that no one took these words seriously. After all, the sects were considered private armed forces and first-rate gangs in the martial arts world. Of course, they could intimidate a small group of people and maintain the peace of a certain region in the northern region. However, the Northern Battlefront Army could also do the same thing. The existence of these private armed forces was not of help to Lin Yuan. Instead, they were hidden dangers and threat. Being eradicated by a ruler with a strong desire for control was the fate that all private armed forces had to face. However, aristocratic families were different. They weren't private armed forces. Most aristocratic families in the northern frontier had a certain amount of northern frontier government offices in the northern frontier. For example, the former mayor of Shunning City, who was now the king of the northern frontier, Hu Yan, was the current leader of the Hu family. In fact, there were many similar people, but they might not have a higher position than Hu Yan. After all, before the Northern Frontier Academy was officially taught, learning to read and write was basically the privilege of aristocratic families. Even cultivation was not something that ordinary people could afford. Just a spiritual item alone was a number that many families couldn't get even if they sold everything they had. Therefore, before the arrival of Lin Yuan's new era, whether it was cultivators or officials, they all came from aristocratic families. It was because of these people that Lin Yuan could carry out his orders and carry them out everywhere in the northern frontier. If Lin Yuan wanted to touch the aristocratic families, it was equal to shaking his rule. This was recognized by everyone. Therefore, the aristocratic families didn't take these words seriously from the beginning. Even if they heard it from others, they just thought it was a rumor spread by the sects to drag the aristocratic families down with them to fight against Lin Yuan. However, at this moment, when Lin Yuan really showed signs of taking action, they suddenly realized that they couldn't find any help at all. They could only rely on themselves to face the coming storm. According to the intelligence of the Demon Emperor Association, today was the day that Li Zhong would enter the city. Countless children of aristocratic families went to the streets one after another. They wanted to see where this mysterious person came from, but who could represent Lin Yuan to compete with these aristocratic families. Soon, they saw the figures of Li Zhong and his companions. Li Zhong, who was in the lead, was riding a white steed with soft hair. He was wearing a moon-white brocade robe decorated with ink patterns and a black fox-fur cloak on his back. Behind him, there were 5,000 soldiers of the Falling Star Army in silver armor. As they galloped, the red cloaks on their backs were like blood flags swaying in the wind. The cities on the northern frontier didn't have city walls. Therefore, Li Zhong and his companions, who had come from afar, didn't intend to stop at all. They directly galloped toward the prince's mansion on the northern frontier. A group of aristocratic family's disciples, who had been waiting on the street for a long time, heard the rumbling sound of horse hooves gradually fading away before they could see the leader's appearance clearly. Who the hell is this person? Why did he lead an army to take office? A disciple from an aristocratic family murmured, his face full of disbelief. The northern frontier supervised the military system very strictly. In the past, the Castellans still had the right to lead the army. However, since the Northern Frontier Guard Army was divided into two armies, one was controlled by Zhang Qilin and the other by Li Zhongxing. Except for the orders of Lin Yuan, Hu Yan, and the two corps commanders, no one else could command the army of the Northern Frontier. Even the generals and colonels in the army were absolutely forbidden to use private troops. Those who violated the law would be stripped of their military status and banished from the country at the very least. This newcomer to the prince's mansion on the northern frontier hadn't even met the local big families in Shunning City, but he had already shown them his power. 5,000 cavalrymen swaggered through the streets. With this privilege, no one would take any chances. Chapter 402. In the mansion of the Prince of the Northern Frontier. Li Zhong dismounted from his horse and gestured to the 5,000 fallen star soldiers behind him. The soldiers immediately pulled the reins and stopped their horses outside the mansion of the Prince of the Northern Frontier. However, the soldiers on the horses all had their hands on the sabers at their waist. It seemed that they would turn into killing machines if they sensed something wrong. Putting away the horsewhip, Li Zhong handed his name card to the guards of the Northern Territory Prince's mansion. The guards already knew that a big shot recognized by Lin Yuan would join the Northern Territory Prince's mansion today. In addition, the scene of the other party leading 5,000 knights was too visually impactful. Therefore, the four guards looked at each other. No one dared to put on the airs of the Northern Territory Prince's mansion and let Li Zhong stand outside the door and wait for Hu Yan to summon him. After looking at each other for a while, they tacitly made way for him. The leader of the guards smiled apologetically and said, "Mr. Li is coming to the mansion to report today. This is what His Excellency the Dragon King has told us. Naturally, you don't have to go through the unnecessary procedures. However, if Mr. Li can go in, these brothers outside." Li Zhong didn't put on airs. He just waved his hand with a smile and said in a deep voice, "It doesn't matter. I'm just here to greet His Highness and will leave soon. If I offend you, please forgive me." Seeing that Li Zhong did not have any intention of sending soldiers into the mansion to intimidate the officials and advisors on the first day of his appointment, the guard let out a sigh of relief. He smiled obsequiously as he led the way for Li Zhong. After passing through the front yard, Li Zhong successfully arrived at the courtyard where Hu Yan was currently living. Li Zhong's eyes paused for a moment on the middle-aged man who was reading an ancient book in the courtyard. He took 2 steps forward, bowed to Hu Yan and said loudly, "I'm Li Zhong. I'm here to report to the mansion of the Northern Frontier on the order of His Excellency the Dragon King. If Your Highness needs anything in the future, please don't hesitate to tell me." Hu Yan smiled and helped Li Zhong up. He said with a smile, "You don't have to be so polite. We're all working for the Demon Emperor. Although I'm the king of the Northern Frontier, I'm no different from a steward. I should thank Mr. Li for coming to the mansion of the Northern Frontier to share a series of work. I've already booked a banquet in Spring Full Restaurant. I hope Mr. Li will do me the honor of welcoming you." The expression on Li Zhong's face stiffened slightly. Obviously, he realized that the banquet that Hu Yan had booked was not as simple as just welcoming him. However, when he thought of Hu Yan's background, he didn't say much. He just restrained the smile in his eyes and waved his hand expressionlessly. "There's no need for a welcoming banquet. When I came here, His Excellency the Dragon King told me that this matter must be done quickly. In addition, I don't have enough manpower. If I delay for a while, it's easy to miss His Excellency the Dragon King's important matter." Hearing that, Hu Yen frowned slightly. However, he still forced a smile and nodded. He said, "That's fine too. When Mr. Li is done with the work at hand, this king will make up for it with this welcoming banquet." Hu Yen was after all from an aristocratic family. In addition to Lei Fan's death, the other city lords had also been stripped of their power. Although the mansion of the northern frontier king still gave them the salary of a city lord, their status in the northern frontier had plummeted. They couldn't even be compared to Lei Fan's lackey Luo Su. At least now, Luo Su was still a proper city lord of the northern frontier. As for him, the king of the northern frontier, he was just a puppet that could be abandoned at any time. He didn't feel it before, but now that he had taken over Lei Fan's position, he finally understood why Lei Fan would take such a risk and try to usurp Lin Yuan's power. After all, his position as the king of the northern frontier was too oppressive. He was like a livestock that was being kept in captivity. Even if Lin Yuan gave him 100,000 troops, it was still meaningless. As the safest and most prosperous city in the northern frontier, the aristocratic families in Shunning City all followed the lead of the Qiao family. Even if they counted the power of the Hu family, Hu Yen didn't think that it would be his turn to be the local tyrant of Shunning City. Even the Qiao family was willing to give some profits to the Hu family in some business. That was because of Lin Yuan's face. If they really fell out, without Lin Yuan's support, the Hu family would be eaten up by the Qiao family in an instant. And outside of Shunning City, there was no place for Hu Yen to show his strength. The aristocratic families in other places were also not to be trifled with. Without the 100,000 guards of the prince's mansion, the Hu family's power in the entire northern frontier could only be considered as second-rate. So today's banquet wasn't entirely booked by Hu Yen. It was more of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier who had asked Hu Yen to set up a stage. They wanted to see what kind of person Li Zhong, who had come under Lin Yuan's secret order, was. Hu Yen didn't want to embarrass those aristocratic families. Plus, he was really curious about how Lin Yuan would deal with the aristocratic families. So he agreed. However, Hu Yen did not expect that Li Zhong would not give him any face at all. He did not even hesitate and directly refused the banquet at night. Obviously, Li Zhong had seen through his intentions and expressed his position in this way. Loss, anger, grievance, and even a little resentment. All kinds of emotions were rolling in Hu Yan's heart. Hu Yan even forgot to control his emotions. He changed from "I" to "this king" in order to remind Li Zhong that there was still a gap between their status. Then, "I'll take my leave." Li Zhong cupped his hands again at Hu Yen. But this time, without waiting for Hu Yen to speak, Li Zhong had already stood up and walked out of the prince's mansion in the northern frontier without looking back. Obviously, Li Zhong didn't take Hu Yan's demonstration seriously. He was here under Lin Yuan's order to carry out the land liquidation plan. If Hu Yen stayed in the northern frontier obediently, the prince's mansion would still be fine. But if Hu Yen wanted to play any tricks, to put it bluntly, those city lords who had been raised as idlers could prepare to take over the northern frontier king's seal. Anyway, the sudden death of a king of the northern frontier made no difference to Hu Yen. And if a few more kings of the northern frontier died, these people would clearly see who had the final say in the northern frontier. Walking out of the gate of the prince's mansion, Li Zhong mounted his horse and said in a cold voice, "Today's grudge has been formed. This Hu Yen will definitely find a way to retaliate. I'll have to trouble Uncle Gao to be more careful. If necessary, I can talk to Lord Dragon King and ask him to transfer some troops from the southern expedition to Uncle Gao for the time being." Although he wasn't afraid of Hu Yen didn't represent himself now. Behind him was the interest group formed by the aristocratic families of the northern frontier, who were forced to stand together for survival. No need. Gao Chuanjin didn't say much. He just gave a simple reply and fell silent. Chapter 403. Back then, the champion of the fallen star army did not know anything else but the art of killing. Otherwise, after the fallen star army left the Yan Xingqi, the renowned champion would only be trapped in the fallen star army in name only. Of course, part of the reason was because Gao Lanfeng cherished their old friendship, but the reason why Gao Lanfeng did not know how to curry favor with his superiors was not small either. If Li Zhong entrusted him with something else, he might not be able to do it well. But for this matter, even if Gao Lanfeng lost his own head, he would be able to ensure that Li Zhong would be safe and sound. Hearing Gao Lanfeng's words, Li Zhong smiled and rode his horse towards another government office in Shunning City. The structure of the members of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion was extremely complicated. There were people like Hu Yan, who relied on Lin Yuan for survival and wealth, and there were also people who rose from humble backgrounds and became powerful cultivators. And these people were the ones who were most willing to carry out Lin Yuan's orders, because they knew very well that their own success could not be replicated. If their children were capable, they would be able to open the door to cultivation for their children. But what about after that? If their children did not have extraordinary talent with their small families, they would definitely not be able to cultivate. Their descendants would have to go back to the bitter days of the past. Therefore, the Northern Frontier Academy that Lin Yuan had promised was the biggest motivation for these people to complete their work. Only the existence of the Beijing Academy could change the fate of their descendants, and allow them to raise their heads and be people. Previously, when Lei Fan tried to usurp the throne, the first people he dealt with were these people. But because the time was too short, after 2 to 3 days, Lei Fan only managed to get rid of the tip of the iceberg. However, these people from humble backgrounds were the most precious assets in Lin Yuan's hands. Losing any one of them would cause Lin Yuan great heartache. This was the reason why Lin Yuan had shed all pretense of cordiality with Lei Fan. Now, Li Zhong was going to pay a visit to one of them, because his next job would be completely inseparable from the other party's help. An hour later, Lin Yuan was soaking in the lake water below his lair, his eyelids slightly closed. A male lead wearing a black hooded robe and a devil mask was currently kneeling on one knee, telling Lin Yuan about the happenings in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. "Okay, got it. You may leave." Lin Yuan was no longer interested in Li Zhong and Hu Yan's next move after the other party reported the situation in the prince's mansion in the northern frontier. Hu Yan's position in the northern territory seemed to be very high, but in reality, he was just a puppet. Although the officials and common people had not reached the point where they did not respect Hu Yan, however, everyone knew that Hu Yan's words only counted in the Hu family. Although the officials of the northern region had to give him some face, when it came to official matters, the so-called northern region king was nothing more than mediocre. When Li Zhong would enter Shunning City, and what he was going to do next were all things that Lin Yuan could divulge. His purpose was to let Li Zhong and Hu Yan have a good showdown. Firstly, he wanted to see how this wise and insightful Mr. Li would fare. Secondly, he wanted to use this opportunity to weaken the prestige of the king of the northern frontier. He wanted to let all the officials and citizens of the northern frontier know that the so-called king of the northern frontier was just SOSO. As long as it was reasonable, it was fine to go against the king of the northern frontier. After all, in Lin Yuan's plan, the position of the king of the northern frontier was just a mascot. Why would a mascot need so much power? However, Lin Yuan did not expect that Hu Yan would collude with the aristocratic families this time. The aristocratic families of the 7 dynasties were as numerous as the stars in the sky. Except for the Qiao family, who did not hesitate to sacrifice themselves for the sake of passing down their legacy, the other aristocratic families who could settle down in the northern frontier were, strictly speaking, not very powerful. They were only in the northern frontier. After leaving Shunning City, the influence of these aristocratic families in the northern frontier would decrease crazily with every step they took to the south. Therefore, Lin Yuan really did not take the aristocratic families of the northern frontier seriously. The Qiao family, the only one who had the ability to wrestle with him, chose to sacrifice themselves again and stood on the side of the general trend. However, the aristocratic families of the northern frontier were full of themselves. Lin Yuan was too lazy to deal with them, but they still insisted on taking themselves seriously and planned to wrestle with Lin Yuan together. After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan shook his head gently and said with a bitter smile, "Li Zhong hasn't asked for help yet. It should be because he has the confidence to solve this little problem. It's better not to rashly intervene." Li Zhong and Hu Yan's fight was obviously a show directed by him. However, after the aristocratic families of the northern frontier got involved, things had changed. However, even though Lin Yuan was dissatisfied, he could only watch from the sidelines. After all, if he personally got involved, the northern frontier would not be able to escape the situation where heads would roll. At that time, even if the aristocratic families of the northern frontier were just trying to survive, they would still rebound strongly under Lin Yuan's oppression, which would bring a lot of trouble to Li Zhong. Moreover, all the strategies of lowering the aristocratic family's vigilance and slowly taking over their land as the northern frontier would be wasted. On the other side, Zhang Xiu, who was far away in the imperial capital, had also received this information. He was only slower than Lin Yuan by a full 2 hours. This was enough to prove the terror and elites of the embroidered guard. After all, if the same task was given to the Shifter Emperor Association, Lin Yuan would need at least another 2 days to receive the information about the feud between Li Zhong and Hu Yan. Lei Qiusheng stretched out his hand and played with the weasel hair brush in his hand. He sneered and said, "This black snake always brings me surprises." He actually promoted a young man from the Fallen Star Army to compete with the aristocratic families of the northern frontier. Only he could think of such a thing. "Your Majesty's words are incorrect." Zhang Xiu, who was standing at the side, shook his head and said in a deep voice, "According to my investigation, although this black snake does not follow the rules, he has never done anything at a loss. He must have a special purpose for provoking the conflict between Li Zhong and Hu Yan. In addition, if Li Zhong really defeats Hu Yan, then even if the aristocratic families of the northern frontier are unwilling to cooperate with Lin Yuan, they must first consider how they will struggle to survive in the future after offending this young man. For it to place Li Xian in this position, it must have its own reasons." Lei Qiusheng muttered to himself for a while before waving his hand. He said expressionlessly, "Then observe the black snake during this period of time. Once he defeats the aristocratic families, then according to his current orders, find some remote and small places to conduct experiments. Remember to keep this matter strictly confidential." "Yes." Zhang Xiu had just cupped his fists when he suddenly felt a heavy object fall into his arms. Zhang Xiu doubtfully raised the heavy object, only to discover that it was a book about the new laws of the northern frontier. "Take a look at it when you have the time. This book about the new laws of the northern frontier is quite interesting." Lei Qiusheng's voice rang out with a hint of a smile. Chapter 404. The first step of Li Zhong's Qingzhang world in the northern frontier was not to directly investigate how many worlds there were in the northern frontier. Instead, he sent out most of the Fallen Star Army to investigate the population of the northern frontier. He also built stone tablets with the register of 10,000 people in each place. This action immediately made many representatives of the aristocratic families frown, because the fields in the 7 cities and the nearby villages were all registered and had not been tampered with. Because the northern region had more mountains than land, it wasn't difficult to develop a large amount of arable land. However, if the arable land outside the city was not protected by enough military forces, it would inevitably be ruined once the demonic beasts launched a beast tide. Therefore, the 7 cities in the northern frontier never expected the farmland outside the city to have a big harvest. To put it bluntly, the northern frontier relied on the mountains to eat. They mainly relied on the low-level demonic beasts and wild beasts in the demonic beast forest to fill their stomach. Therefore, the people in the northern frontier had always been fierce. Otherwise, how could the 600,000 Northern Frontier Guard army disperse the 3 million Xiong Wu army? Therefore, the farmland neglected by the 7 city lords naturally fell into the hands of the aristocratic families. Although they had their own owners, they were all hidden in the aristocratic families. The farmland of the farmers was protected by the aristocratic families. Even if the demonic beasts attacked, it would not be damaged much. Moreover, it was better to hand over half of the farmland to the aristocratic families than to hand over 70% of the farmland to the dynasty. Although the 50% was already reduced to 30% or even 20% according to the tax-free standards of the aristocratic families, it was only the 7 city lords of the northern frontier and the Shenwu dynasty's interests that were harmed in the end. If the civilians could pay less grain, the aristocratic families could also make a small profit. Naturally, they would not be so greedy that they even had to lie about the amount of farmland. Shunning City, Qiao family's courtyard, elders' meeting room. This Mr. Li is quite capable. Qiao Yilin sat on the seat of the head of the family and smiled while stroking his beard. He said in a playful tone, "When this Mr. Li finds out the population of the northern frontier, he will secretly stab us in the back. Didn't you all see that the Dragon King opened up a lot of farmland when he opened up the new cities in the northern frontier? If I'm not wrong, Li Zhong's next step will be to let the commoners who didn't join the aristocratic families and the refugees who came from outside to farm the land in those new cities. Although these lands won't be distributed to individuals, the taxes should be very low. At least, it's much cheaper than giving it to the aristocratic families. With these examples, those commoners who have entrusted their land to the aristocratic families will have to abandon it and open up new lands for our Lord Dragon King, even if they can't get their lands back. How is this possible?" One of the Qiao family's elders frowned and said in a deep voice, "Yilin, you must not be muddle-headed. Farmland is the lifeline of our aristocratic families. Although the farmland in the northern frontier is not as rich as in the south, it is still a considerable income. If the northern frontier monarch's residence takes it, our Qiao family will also suffer a great loss." "Great uncle, you are wrong." Qiao family's 7th grandfather, who was of the same generation as Qiao Yilin, smiled and said in a clear voice, "Farmland can indeed bring a lot of profit, but great uncle, are you willing to give up the director's position in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce under Lord Dragon King's name for that little harvest?" The Qiao family's elder frowned even more, but he still shook his head very honestly. Lin Yuan might have already controlled the price of the phase, but that was only for the northern frontier. These aristocratic families had obtained sufficient stock from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. As long as they were willing to make a long trip, even if they couldn't arbitrarily set the price for the sake of the northern frontier monarch's residence, it was more than enough for them to increase the price by 10 times. After a big business deal, the profit would be much more than a season's worth of farmland. Offending the northern frontier monarch's residence, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, and the unyielding Lord Dragon King for some farmland was an unwise move. However, this was how the aristocratic families were. They had been used to doing whatever they wanted in the northern frontier for so many years. They had always been the ones taking advantage of the Shenwu dynasty's loopholes and thinking of ways to create more benefits for themselves. When had they ever been like this, where they had to watch the local ruler take away things that belonged to them to fill the pockets of the officials? Even if they knew that it wasn't good to offend Lin Yuan, The benefits and face would force them to work together to pressure Lin Yuan and force him to give up this decree that could sever the foundation of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier. Of course, this wasn't just a matter of face. If they lost their farmland, they would become the common laughingstock of the aristocratic families. More importantly, they would lose their own farmland. However, the northern frontier monarchs' residents would still make them pay the taxes that were due to the farmland. If the commoners went to cultivate the new land in the northern frontier, their farmland would definitely be wasted. They couldn't possibly let the Qiao family's entire family of cultivators personally cultivate the farmland, right? In order to pay the taxes, they had to rely on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to earn benefit. Relying on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce meant that these aristocratic families would all follow Lin Yuan's lead. Otherwise, if Lin Yuan used a little trick to cut off your farmland for a month or two, it would be enough to greatly damage your vitality. If you cut off your farmland for half a year, even if Lin Yuan didn't deal with you, the other aristocratic families would completely kick you out of the aristocratic families after eating up your share. In other words, once they lost their farmland, they would have to be Lin Yuan's dogs. And if they weren't good dogs, if Lin Yuan said he would beat them to death, he would beat them to death. Qiao Yilin stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Granduncle, you don't have to think too much about this matter. From the secret realm to the sect, our Qiao family has already stood on the same side as Lord Dragon King. Even if we lose our farmland, as long as our family members don't do anything illegal, I think Lord Dragon King will still give us some face and protect our Qiao family's legacy. Besides, the things we did before were just things that our Qiao family helped Lord Dragon King a little. The land reform in the northern frontier is the time for our Qiao family to shine. If this matter is done well, our Qiao family will be recorded in the annals of the northern frontier." The new laws of the northern frontier were just as Lei Qiusheng had said. It was indeed a very interesting set of laws. Although it added a lot of new laws, the punishments weren't harsh. Only when one tried to usurp the throne or create chaos would their entire family be exterminated. There weren't even many laws that could carry out the death penalty. In comparison, compared to the new laws of the northern frontier, which had more rules, the previous laws were really harsh. Because the previous laws directly forced you with a knife, telling you what you could and couldn't do. But the new laws of the northern frontier, to put it more simply, were telling you, I didn't say that you had to be a law-abiding good person, but I was just reminding you that everyone had a bottom line and couldn't be too bad. Chapter 405. Yilin, what do you mean? The Qiao family elder's eyelids twitched as he asked Qiao Yilin. The fact that the Qiao family's name would be recorded in the annals of the northern frontier not only moved this elder, but also caused the hearts of many of the Qiao family members present to stir. All of them looked at Qiao Yilin, who was sitting on the patriarch's seat. The Qiao family was an aristocratic family with thousands of years of history. Naturally, there had been many powerful figures in their history, but that was just personal glory. Once these powerful figures passed away, the Qiao family's descendants would not be able to take over, and they would instantly lose their backing. Otherwise, with the Qiao family's background, how could they have wronged themselves to settle down in such a desolate place like the northern frontier, where demonic beasts would often invade? Yan Xingqi was forcefully exiled, and the Qiao family could be considered to have exiled themselves. It was also because of their self-imposed exile that the Qiao family was able to escape unscathed from Lei Qiusheng's usurpation of the Thousand Swords dynasty, and not be destroyed like the other aristocratic families. Thus, no matter how great an individual's glory was, it would not be able to bring much protection to the Qiao family. However, if it was the glory of the entire family, it would be a different matter. The Qiao family had placed all their hopes on Lin Yuan in this revolution. Once Lin Yuan succeeded, they would be able to rely on their surname, Qiao, to return to the center of the sky martial continent's stage. Even if the future generations were ignorant and incompetent, the northern region would not sit idly by and watch such a noble family fall into ruin. Moreover, the Qiao family had a strict family tradition, and it was impossible for the future generations to be ignorant and incompetent. As long as they did not do anything as disgraceful as Lei Qiusheng, the Qiao family could be as stable as Mount Tai in this storm of change, and even make a lot of money. Although our Qiao family has many servants, our ancestors valued our family's traditions, and those without cultivation are not even qualified to be a servant in our Qiao family. Thus, with the Reformation, we definitely cannot rely on a group of cultivators to cultivate the land. Not only is there no meaning in leaving the land in our Qiao family's hands, it will even bring trouble to the Qiao family. If no one cultivates the land for a long time, the originally fertile land will be filled with weed. However, after the northern frontier's prince's residence clears up the land, they will definitely demand taxes according to the land owned by the aristocratic families. Thus, if the land is left in our hands, it will instead bring unnecessary expenses to our Qiao family. Qiao Yilin had already discussed this with Lin Yuan. As an aristocratic family with thousands of years of history, Qiao Yilin was very clear on where his but should land in order to survive. So what if the other aristocratic families in the northern frontier had countless slaves who had signed contracts to sell themselves? Even if they could cultivate their own land, it would still be useless. Qiao Yilin was very clear that the next step in Li Zhong's plan to clear up the land was to determine the ratio between the aristocratic families and the commoners. This meant that the aristocratic families in the northern frontier would have to pay the same taxes as the commoners. The tax rate was actually not high, only about 50%. For the commoners, 50% tax rate was already 20% lower than the original rate. Moreover, the new land could be reduced for another 10 years. In these 10 years, they only needed to pay 20% of the tax. Although the tax rate would be adjusted later, in the first 10 years, not all aristocratic families would be able to withstand 50% of the tax. In the past, the commoners would place their land in the hands of the aristocratic families. Every year, they would pay 50% of the tax to the aristocratic families and keep the remaining 50% for themselves. Therefore, the aristocratic families did not need to pay anything to be able to receive the tax for free. Then, they would use their own privileges to reduce the tax and immediately receive a large amount of income. However, if they were to cultivate their own land, it would be a huge expense. This was because they had no other choice but to use their own slaves. When the commoners responded to the northern frontier prince's mansion's call to cultivate new land, if you made trouble for them, the northern frontier prince's mansion would make trouble for you. At that time, it would not be impossible for your family to be destroyed. No matter what, the aristocratic families also had a limited number of slaves. Even if those aristocratic families who had a large amount of cultivated land sent out all their forces, they might not be able to cultivate all the cultivated land. However, when the northern frontier prince's mansion asked you to pay tax, they would only look at the amount of cultivated land under your name. They would not ask how much you had cultivated. After all, you were able to pay tax for so many years. Now that the northern frontier prince's mansion had changed owners, you would not be able to pay tax. Then, did you not see clearly the northern frontier prince conferred by the Shenwu dynasty, or did you look down on the northern frontier god conferred by the Shenwu dynasty? At that time, you would be accused of treason and offending your superiors. You would not even have a place to cry. In addition, did your family have someone in the Shenwu dynasty imperial court? What's the use of that? Lei Qiusheng's words did not carry much weight in the northern frontier. Who became the prince of the northern frontier depended entirely on Lin Yuan's wishes. Just how tyrannical was your family's high-ranking official in the imperial court to be able to command Lin Yuan, who even Lei Qiusheng could not command? Taking a step back, if you forced Lin Yuan into a corner, and he deliberately did something bad, the northern frontier prince's mansion would really take a step back. Once this matter was reported by the embroidered guard, you would be done for if Lei Qiuxing skinned your family's backer in the imperial court. Once the pressure from above was gone, Lin Yuan would make a comeback. At that time, do you still dare to bare your fangs and brandish your claws? With so many methods, no matter how unwilling the northern frontier aristocratic families were, they would still have to hand over their land to the northern frontier prince's mansion. Otherwise, when it came time to collect taxes every year, they would use a series of methods to drag down a large aristocratic family. By the time these aristocratic families knew that stubbornness would not work and they handed over their land, they would find that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, which they relied on for survival, would also announce a series of business taxes. Although it would not be so harsh that it would force the northern frontier aristocratic families to the point of no return, but in the end, the aristocratic families would only be able to rely on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In the end, they could only pinch their noses and bear with it. After fighting with Lin Yuan, Lei Fan and Hu Yan, coupled with the series of information he had gathered from the northern frontier prince's mansion, Qiao Yilin, as a qualified decision-maker, had quickly understood that he was no match for Lin Yuan. Furthermore, in such a situation, the more he stubbornly resisted, the more he would lose in the end. If he chose to side with Lin Yuan, perhaps he might even be able to obtain a certain degree of reduction in business taxes in the future. If that's the case, we'll do as Qiao Yilin says. The clan elder rubbed his hands together, unable to contain the excitement in his heart as he said in a deep voice, "When will our Qiao family donate the land under our name?" Qiao Yilin smiled as he stroked his beard, his heart thumping loudly. If the Qiao family donated their land too early, although they would be setting an example, the other aristocratic families would also react and simply follow the Qiao family in donating their own land. Although the result would be the same, the northern frontier prince's mansion would not be able to vent their anger, nor would they be able to let these aristocratic families experience the terror of the great Dragon King. It would be hard for them to avoid offending Lin Yuan. But if they donated their land too late and allowed others to beat them to it, wouldn't the gains outweigh the losses? Chapter 406. In the newly built government office of Lord Zhang's mansion in the northern frontier. The moment Li Zhong saw off Hu Yan, who had come here to inspect the work, his eyes were full of mockery. Wasn't the so-called inspection just to see what his subordinates were going to do next, so that they could inform those aristocratic families so as to reduce the loss? Pitifully, Li Zhong had foreseen this. Therefore, when Hu Yan came here for the first time, he found that the documents recorded by Fallen Star Army were a bunch of confusing numbers. Additionally, Li Zhong had purchased a lot of books during this period. At the beginning, Hu Yan thought that Li Zhong was a pedantic scholar. However, after many inspections, Hu Yan finally found that those armored staffs were translating the numbers on the documents with different books. However, they didn't leave any notes. Instead, they just glanced at the documents and tore them into pieces before throwing them into wooden buckets with other scraps of paper. After that, they would wait for specialized people to collect them. This was the way the Fallen Star Army used to deliver intelligence during the war. Each group had a series of specially prepared books as translations. Only the veterans of the Fallen Star Army knew which page, line, and word those numbers represented. After memorizing the numbers, they would flip through the corresponding books to translate the intelligence. Finally, they would report it to Li Zhong, who was in charge of the Lord's mansion. I see. Tell them to reply to me. Just say. Li Zhong gradually lowered his voice. Hiding outside the courtyard, Hu Yan slightly frowned as he couldn't hear what Li Zhong said clearly. Neither did he know whom Li Zhong wanted his subordinates to reply to. However, it was Hu Yan's first time to know that someone other than Fallen Star Army was contacting Li Zhong in Shunning City. However, Hu Yen was also a scholar when he was young. After a few rounds of inspection, he had already memorized the book used by the different groups as a book. Today, he also saw a piece of paper with only a few numbers on it, but it was kept by Li Zhong alone. It was obviously important information, so he quietly memorized the string of numbers and hurriedly returned to his courtyard. He flipped open the book that his attendant had bought earlier and began to read the meaning of the string of numbers. You are paid by the people help the people. The people below are easy to abuse, and the heavens cannot bully them. 16 words were found by Hu Yen one by one. After reading this line of words, Hu Yen only felt a chill all over his body. A chill ran up his spine and finally drilled into the back of his neck. Hu Yen suddenly shivered and collapsed on the chair. As a member of an aristocratic family, although Hu Yen knew that Lin Yuan wasn't easy to deal with, he had been beating around the bush, trying to get Li Zhong's policy against aristocratic families. After all, this work used to be planned by Lin Yuan and carried out by Lei Fan. They, the indigenous forces of the northern frontier, basically did not have the right to participate. Now that Lei Fan was gone, and Lin Yuan had sent Li Xian to handle this matter, even if Hu Yen wanted to, he did not have the ability to do so. These words, Hu Yen, who had read a lot of books, had never seen them in that book, so he could only conclude that these words came from Lin Yuan. In addition, Li Zhong had purposely shown these words to him, so it should be Lin Yuan warning him not to cross the line when doing things. Motherf asterisk cur, Motherf asterisk cur, Motherf asterisk cur. Hu Yen cursed a few times, and his eyes were already bloodshot. He said hatefully, surnamedly, "You don't want me to have a good time, so I won't let you have a good time either. How dare you report this matter to Lin Yuan? Good, I'll let you know who's the biggest boss in Shunning City." If Li Zhong had used other means to warn Hu Yen, because of Lin Yuan's terror, Hu Yen would have admitted defeat. However, Li Zhong had used Lin Yuan's words to make an issue out of it, which made it easy for Hu Yen to connect the dots that Lin Yuan already knew what he had done during this period of time. When he thought of Lei Fan's fate, even if Hu Yen said that he was not afraid, his heart was still terrified. At this time, Hu Yen, who knew that there was nothing he could do, could only drag Li Zhong down with him to perish together. In Li Zhong's mansion, Gao Fengzhen was still wearing his heavy armor, and said in a low muffled voice, "Dragon King said that if you do this, Hu Yen will completely lose his mind. If he refuses to admit defeat, we will have a tough battle to fight." "It's not a problem, Uncle Gao." Li Zhong clasped his hands and said with a smile, "You still don't understand the Dragon King's intention. Although the Dragon King has set up his own statue in the northern frontier, it is not to show his divinity, but to give the people of the northern frontier a way to reach the sky. In this way, not even the slightest movement in the northern frontier can escape the eyes of the Dragon King. First, eliminate the sects, then weaken the aristocratic families. After these two things are done, the Dragon King should weaken the authority of the officials in the northern frontier, and then increase the authority of the new law in the northern frontier." Gao Fengzhen was slightly startled. For a moment it was difficult to understand Li Zhong's meaning. In short, the northern frontier that the Dragon King wants can only have one authority, and that is himself, or rather, the new law in the northern frontier that he has compiled. The so-called officials and army are just tools to maintain and implement the new law in the northern frontier. These people only need to have enough ability to complete the wishes of the Dragon King. They don't need to have any authority, otherwise the reform in the northern frontier will be meaningless. After a few decades, these officials and army commanders will become new aristocratic families and sects, and will be even more difficult to deal with than they are now. To put it simply, the Dragon King wants to rule the northern frontier by law, and not the northern frontier by the king. As long as the new law in the northern frontier exists, and can restrain the people of the northern frontier, then the existence of the northern frontier king does not have much meaning at all. Li Zhong cupped his hands in the direction of the monster forest and said with a smile, "To be able to meet a hero like the Dragon King in this life, I, Li Zhong, should be able to put my knowledge to good use." Gao Fengzhen scratched his head and said in a low voice, "Then just say that the Dragon King wants to deal with Hu Yan, and doesn't want the northern frontier to continue to have the title of King of the Northern Frontier. Wouldn't that be the end of it?" "That's fine too." Li Zhong was choked by Gao Fengzhen and could only roll his eyes. However, now was indeed the best time to make a move on Hu Yan. Lei Fan had already died of illness, and his corpse was hung in the sect of the Blood God. The weak nature of the position of King of the Northern Frontier had long been seen through by others. If another Hu Yan fell, there would be no need for the next King of the Northern Frontier to exist. Moreover, it was Hu Yan who had committed the taboo. If the Dragon King wanted to get rid of Hu Yan, no one would be able to find any fault with it. It was much better than Lei Fan who died without knowing the reason. After all, the people of the northern frontier would not understand why the dignified king of the northern frontier wanted to usurp power. Wasn't the king of the northern frontier the highest official in the northern frontier? Although the internal strife in the Shenwu dynasty was still ongoing, it was not far from being pacified. Getting rid of Hu Yan now was better than finding a groundless crime in the future. Otherwise, who knew how many people would use this as an excuse to attack the northern frontier? Chapter 407. Outside Shun Ning City, in a barren mountain without any vegetation, Lin Yuan was sitting cross-legged, his eyelids were closed, and his breathing was even, as if he had fallen asleep. Suddenly, there was a series of footsteps behind him. Lin Yuan said without turning his head, "I thought I would have to wait for you for another 4 hours. I didn't expect you to come so soon. The Demon Emperor summoned me. Even if we are thousands of miles apart, I have to put down what I'm doing and wait for your orders." The man behind Lin Yuan did not have the slightest emotion in his tone. He wore a ghost mask on his face, and a black hooded robe covered his body. Lin Yuan could barely see that this man was very tall and sturdy. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to speak, the man stopped and said with a smile, "This subordinate has done my best for the Demon Emperor since I joined the Council of the Demon Emperor. I don't know why the Demon Emperor suspects that this subordinate is related to those guys hiding in the dark?" Although there was laughter in his voice, the air was filled with a chill as soon as he finished speaking. "It's not that I suspect you, but you told me yourself that you are not clean." Lin Yuan still did not turn around, as if the man behind him was not a threat to him at all. Even his tone was extremely calm. "I'm all ears." That man put the dagger back into his sleeve, sat down cross-legged, and stared at Lin Yuan. Before this king took over the northern frontier, the Shenwu dynasty had already suffered a great change. The Qinjiang dynasty and the Frost Mirror dynasty besieged it. The Hengduan Mountains and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas also did not miss this opportunity. It could be said that the Shenwu dynasty was about to be destroyed. At this time, the remnants of the Jiao clan secretly moved and wanted to take this opportunity to overthrow the Shenwu dynasty. However, no matter how many tricks the remnants of the Jiao clan had up their sleeves, they still relied on the Hengduan Mountains to survive. At that time, the imperial court only intended to keep Shunning City in suspense, to create a little pressure for the Shenwu dynasty. However, the remnants of the Jiao clan, who couldn't even survive outside the Hengduan Mountains, dared to put their master in deep trouble and intended to help the demon beasts take over Shunning City. But this kind of taboo, not to mention the remnants of the Jiao clan who were still shouting orthodox slogans, even those evil cultists who everyone had the right to kill might not have the guts to do it. After all, no matter whether this matter succeeded or not, it had touched the bottom line of human beings. When the time came, the entire Tianwu continent would be purged. These small forces who lived in the darkness but didn't have the ability to overturn the entire world would have no way to survive. Therefore, the remaining members of the Jiao clan set their eyes on the assembly of Demon Monarch. They naively thought that after the assembly of Demon Monarch had done such a thing, all the dynasties would just wipe out the assembly of Demon Monarch. Therefore, they changed into our uniforms and planned to take over the city wall of Shunning City. Lin Yuan's voice sounded indifferent, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Yes, I know about this. That person nodded, but changed the topic and asked, "But, what does this have to do with me? At that time, you were in charge of the assembly of Demon Monarch in Shunning City. Even if I had great abilities, I couldn't have done it under your nose, right?" The remaining members of the Jiao clan were naive. They thought that by framing the assembly of Demon Monarch, the Shenwu dynasty would only wipe out the assembly of Demon Monarch. They could then regain control of the Dark World in the northern frontier and become the uncrowned king of the underground order of the Shenwu dynasty. But they didn't think that compared to the assembly of Demon Monarch, which was rooted in the northern frontier, the remaining members of the Jiao clan, who were scattered all over the Shenwu dynasty and even had the support of the people in some places, were really not presentable. If they had to wipe out the Jiao clan, the Shenwu dynasty would never let go of this opportunity to attack the remaining members of the Jiao clan. Speaking of this, Lin Yuan paused, and then smiled. So at that time, it seemed that the people who gave advice to the remaining members of the Jiao clan were either complete idiots, or they didn't care about the life and death of the remaining members of the Jiao clan at all. That is, a third party intervened. They wished that the assembly of Demon Monarch would die together with the remaining members of the Jiao clan. Not bad. It's reasonable and clear. But that person's tone still didn't change, and he asked again, "What does this have to do with me?" The assembly of Demon Monarch had eyes and ears all over the northern frontier at that time. With my identity, everything I did, and who I met, it should all be recorded, right? Lin Yuan's closed eyes slightly opened and sneered. "On the surface, this matter indeed has nothing to do with you. Even when Dong reported to me that you were involved in this matter, I only said a few words to him, and didn't suspect you much. Even if the remaining members of the Jiao clan weren't wearing the uniform of the Assembly of Demon Monarch, I wouldn't have suspected that it was the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch." That person was silent for a moment, and then suddenly smiled bitterly and murmured, I see. Previously, the remaining members of the Jiao clan had changed into the uniform of the Assembly of Demon Monarch to seize the city wall. Although Lin Yuan didn't pursue the matter, he already knew that there was a traitor among the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch. However, he didn't have any evidence. Even if he caught the traitor, he naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to admit that he was the traitor. But this time, when attacking the sects in the northern frontier, the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch still didn't keep their hands clean. Especially when the information about the sect of the Blood Divine was suddenly cut off, but no one, including Lin Yuan, received the news. This kind of thing wasn't something that just anyone could do. It was normal for Lin Yuan to suspect him. Moreover, during this period of time, in order to not make any mistakes, he personally stayed in Shunning City to ensure that the news that the sect of the Blood Divine was out of control wouldn't spread to Lin Yuan. Since the last time, when the remaining members of the Jiao clan pretended to be members of the Assembly of Demon Monarch, Lin Yuan had set up some spies in the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Some information that even the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch didn't know about would be mysteriously hung at the place where the information was sold. Now that he thought about it, perhaps Lin Yuan had been monitoring them for a long time. Demon Monarch, you are indeed as powerful as the rumors say. I am sincerely convinced. That person took off his black hood and mask, revealing a waxy yellow face. It was a face that was hard to find in a sea of people. However, the waxy yellow skin was obviously due to long-term malnutrition. It didn't match his burly figure, so it was quite distinctive. Although this person didn't look very eye-catching, he was the second most famous person in the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Whether it was Su Nan, who founded the Assembly of Demon Monarch, or Sherdong, who was promoted by Lin Yuan from Shunning City, even if the two of them were tied together, their prestige in the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch might not be comparable to this vice president, Ding Zai, who didn't have the aptitude for cultivation, but was personally involved in everything. Chapter 408. As the saying goes, give me a peach in return. Lin Yuan lazily turned around and said calmly, I have already told you how you were exposed. Are you not going to tell me who you are, and what is your purpose of infiltrating my association of the Demon Emperor? Lin Yuan had a mocking smile on his face as he said coldly, or are you going to let me ask you myself? The moment Lin Yuan said that, Ding Zai subconsciously shuddered. Tianwu Continent's interrogation and interrogation by torture were actually still the same. It was nothing more than torture and the like. However, as long as Lin Yuan caught a person alive, and it was not the kind of person who was brainwashed to only know loyalty to his own organization, he would definitely be able to ask what he wanted. Although Ding Zai did not know what methods Lin Yuan was using, but even the elite member of the Ether Association, who was known as the leader of the underground forces of the Shenwu dynasty, was unable to withstand Lin Yuan's interrogation and told him everything he knew. To others, whether this Ether Association member told him or not was a secret. But Ding Zai, who was in charge of intelligence work in the northern frontier, was very clear. Not only did the other party tell him everything, he even shamelessly asked Lin Yuan for a job, intending to live his life in the northern frontier while concealing his identity. Although Ding Zai did not mind being enemies with Lin Yuan, but he really did not want to experience Lin Yuan's interrogation method. Since Lord Demon Emperor has asked, this subordinate will naturally tell you everything, but Ding Zai narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled coldly. I have to give Lord Demonic Emperor a reminder. I'm not in cahoots with the Ether Society. In fact, for a faction like the Ether Society that isn't even presentable, the organization behind me can just reach out and crush them like a bug. Lin Yuan lifted his chin and sneered. If you say so, then I know what to do. However, the Almighty behind you is blocking that door. Do you really have the time to deal with me? When I reach the desolate demon realm, or even a higher realm, do you think that the organization behind you will still dare to provoke me? Ding Zai suddenly fell silent. That door. It could be said to be the highest level of secret in the entire Sky Martial continent. The slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of the entire continent. It wasn't that there weren't any cultivators at the Void Netherworld realm or higher. In fact, there were quite a few of them. It was just that they were all outside that door, guarding against whatever was inside. Logically speaking, with Lin Yuan's realm and background, it was impossible for him to know about the existence of that door. Even Kirin, the beast master of the Hengduan mountain range, only had some guesses, but did not have any concrete evidence. Unless this Lin Yuan was truly the reincarnation of some ancient greater demon. Seeing Ding Zai's silence, Lin Yuan suddenly sneered and said in a cold voice, the organization behind you is actually not interested in the northern frontier. What they want to know, a small fry like you doesn't have the qualifications to know. So even if you seize the northern frontier from my hands, you won't be able to escape death if you don't get what the big shots want. Gulp. Ding Zai swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Just as Lin Yuan said, with the scale and level of the organization behind him, it was impossible for them to set their eyes on the northern frontier. Even if the northern frontier was prosperous after Lin Yuan's reform, it couldn't attract the interest of those big shots. For them, 1 or 2 territories might not be as tempting as a disciple who could pass on their mantle. But the key was that the orders from above were only for them to infiltrate the northern frontier. They didn't mention the specific purpose at all. And these unlucky people who took the mission to sneak into the northern frontier didn't want to wait a moment longer. Recently, they had covered up the activities of the Blood Divine Church because they wanted to use the hands of the second generation to get rid of Lin Yuan, the biggest obstacle. Then they could take over the northern frontier. After handing over the northern frontier to the organization, they could receive the reward and return to the organization's paradise to cultivate. Now, after listening to Lin Yuan's words, Ding Zai only felt a chill all over his body. At this moment, he realized that what the big shots wanted was indeed in the northern frontier. But it was nothing else but something in Lin Yuan's hands or some secret on Lin Yuan. For them, the northern frontier was nothing more than a small piece of land that they could destroy with a wave of their hand. If they misunderstood the meaning of those big shots, would they have a good end when they returned to the organization? I just gave you a few words of advice. Why are you sweating so much? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with cold light. He said in a low voice, "Tell me, which families have come to the northern frontier?" From the information obtained in the secret realm, there were many sects in ancient times, but the most powerful ones were the Fairy Cloud Temple, the Golden Lotus Temple, and the Boundless Academy. They were the leaders of the three giants of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Even the powerful Freedom Yard was just a branch of the Golden Lotus Temple, and it was a branch that couldn't be seen in public. In addition to these three giants, there were all kinds of big and small forces. However, in the timeline earlier than the ancient times, the Tianwu continent had undergone great changes. Countless immortals broke through the gate of heaven and left countless methods and inheritances for people to cultivate. This was the origin of cultivators and demonic beasts. At that time, the cultivators were incomparably powerful. Most of the Void Realm cultivators were like lackeys. Now, the various divine beast clans were all the more prosperous branches of the ancient times. It was said that they had all migrated from the Gate of Heaven, and some of the weaker ones had either gone extinct or became the rare ancient species. Of course, great ancient clans like the Dragon Phoenix Kirin were still existences that could look down on the heavens and earth. However, this prosperity of the Tianwu continent's cultivation world did not last for long. When the timeline had just entered the ancient times, the Gate of Heaven moved again. However, this time, it was not some kind of opportunity or gift that came out. Instead, it was demons and ferocious beasts that only chose humans to devour. In almost the entire ancient times, it was humans and demonic beasts that fought for survival against the mutated beasts that came out of the Gate of Heaven. The demonic beasts and evil cult members of today's purgatory were all hidden dangers left behind by those demons and ferocious beasts. Since the ancient times, the Gate of Heaven had always remained open. Until now, countless indescribable monsters had tried to invade. They had always coveted the Tianwu continent, either destroying it or enslaving it. The only thing that could be confirmed was that they did not have the slightest bit of goodwill towards the natives of the Tianwu continent. Until now, all the cultivators of the Void Realm and above, regardless of whether they were willing or not, had to guard the vicinity of the Gate of Heaven. The experts who left behind their inheritances even had to take the risk to enter the Gate of Heaven to explore and see what was going on there. However, those who entered the Gate of Heaven never came back. Chapter 409. However, these things were a secret to most of the cultivators in Tianwu continent. It wasn't that there weren't any cultivation techniques in the Void Realm and Desolate Demon Realm, but those who mastered them were all near the Heaven's Gate. And these powerful cultivators were destined to fight to protect this world, so they couldn't be like the low-level cultivators and open up sects to recruit disciples. They could only send out disciples who couldn't resist the creatures in the Heaven's Gate to open up sects and select suitable seedlings from the countless people in Tianwu continent to carry on their legacy. This was also the reason why there were so many sects in Tianwu continent. Lin Yuan also had some guesses about the existence behind the Heaven's Gate, but he didn't have the strength to prove it. After all, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and Ravenfield Manor were all things he had heard of in his previous life. The world behind the Heaven's Gate wasn't the world he was in his previous life, but there must be some connection between the two. There might even be a path to return to the world of his previous life. But for now, his strength was still too weak. In the eyes of those big shots in the Void Realm and Desolate Demon Realm, he only knew these secrets and had the qualifications to select disciples for them. He didn't even have the qualifications to guard the Heaven's Gate, so how could he have the strength to enter the Heaven's Gate? But with the system, as a cheat, Lin Yuan believed that it wouldn't be difficult for him to find a way back. The Shang-Lu Association that I am in, the Four United Group that the Fire Kirin belongs to, and a person from the Second Life. With Lin Yuan holding the Death Gate, Ding Zai naturally didn't have the guts to threaten Lin Yuan. He could only smile and obey Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's rock skin closed up slightly. After all, the secret realm was something left behind from the ancient times. In these long years, countless new forces rose, and naturally, countless old forces were destroyed. Anyway, the two organizations that Ding Zai mentioned weren't recorded in the palace, so even if Lin Yuan wanted to pretend to be unfathomable, he still didn't know the background of the other party. After pondering for a moment, Lin Yuan opened his eyes slightly and asked, "The person from the Second Life, is he the ancestor of the Blood Divine sect?" "Yes, according to my investigation, that person is called Yang Qinglin, a person from more than 14,000 years ago. Although he wasn't the founder of the Blood Divine sect, he was once the most dazzling genius of the Blood Divine sect. However, he was schemed against by an enemy sect and died's death. But I don't know what method he used. He actually came back to life after 14,000 years. Lin Yuan was silent. Even a demon of the desolate demon realm like the Fire Kirin had the method of resurrection, let alone a being from 14,000 years ago whose cultivation was 2 realms higher than the Kongming realm. Don't think that he was easy to bully just because he was reincarnated. After this old thing mastered the method of resurrection in his previous life, he had set up many backup plans and trump cards for himself. He was definitely a tough nut to crack. Yang Qinglin wants to meet me. What do you think he wants to do? Lin Yuan's eyes widened a little, revealing a dignified aura. He knew even less about the Blood Divine sect, which wasn't ranked in the northern frontier and had been around for longer than the Qiao family. It wasn't easy to find someone who knew about it, so naturally, he had to ask. Ding Zai frowned and pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "I heard that the Blood Divine sect has a secret method that can absorb the blood of living creatures to improve one's cultivation. Although it is suspected of pulling up seedlings to help them grow, whether it's from the Heavenly Dipper realm to the Kongming realm or from the Kongming realm to the Tao, the threshold is not easy to cross. I guess that this Yang Qinglin is not confident that he can cultivate to the Supreme Realm by himself, so he wants to use this method to help himself break through." When Lin Yuan read novels in his previous life, he often saw some strong people reincarnating and recultivating, and easily entering the realm of their previous life. However, in reality, this was not the case. The method of reincarnation and recultivation was heaven-defying, so how could there not be any restrictions? When an immortal reincarnated, there was still a period of dust. If one didn't work hard to cultivate, or if there was a friend from his previous life to guide him, even an immortal would fall into the mortal world and become an ordinary person. Therefore, even if one reached the immortal realm, reincarnation and recultivation was a gamble. The slightest carelessness would cause all the hard work to vanish. Moreover, the supreme realm of the Tianwu continent might not necessarily be inferior to the immortals that Lin Yuan knew. So, he wants to get permission from this king to let him use the blood sacrifice of the people of the northern frontier to break through? Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes flashed with a cold light, causing Ding Zai, who was standing opposite to him, to break out in cold sweat. At this moment, Lin Yuan was really too terrifying. Ding Zai did not doubt that in the next moment, Lin Yuan would suddenly explode, turning into a ferocious beast that would swallow him whole. After 4 to 5 breaths of time, Lin Yuan finally calmed down the surging anger in his heart, and said in a deep voice, "Although the power behind you has not shown any goodwill to this king, but compared to the other families, you have not done anything hostile to this king. Therefore, this king will consider giving you a chance. Perhaps in the near future, our two families can join hands." If it was any other person who said this, Ding Zai would definitely scoff. But when these words came from Lin Yuan's mouth, there was no element of boasting. After all, the secrets on Lin Yuan's body were not known even by the big shots behind him. They could only believe that Lin Yuan was indeed the reincarnation of some ancient demon. However, there were also many people who had divined Lin Yuan's origins. It was just that none of those big shots were willing to reveal Lin Yuan's origins. Instead, it made Lin Yuan even more mysterious. Moreover, putting aside the secrets on Lin Yuan's body, just based on the speed of cultivation, Lin Yuan was also a monstrous genius. In less than a year and a half, he had cultivated from a wild beast to a mountain lord. This kind of cultivation speed, not to mention ordinary people, even Yang Qinglin, who had reincarnated with his previous life's memories, was far from comparable. If he was given a period of time, how far would he be from those big shots? But Ding Zai did not directly agree, because he was very clear that there was no free lunch in this world. Previously, he had covered the eyes of the Demon Emperor Association and wanted Yang Qinglin to kill Lin Yuan. According to Lin Yuan's personality, he would have already been sentenced to death. But at this moment, not only did Lin Yuan not pursue the matter, he even showed goodwill. Therefore, Ding Zai was very clear that Lin Yuan should have taken a fancy to him, or the help that the organization behind him could provide. Chapter 410. Don't look at me like that. This king isn't a fool. He knows you won't attack him directly, but revealing some information should be within the scope of your ability, right? Lin Yuan looked at Ding Zai with a mocking gaze. Obviously, he had seen through Ding Zai's little thoughts. But thinking about it, although Lin Yuan's current strength was not enough, his cultivation speed was there. In addition, the northern frontier was currently a hot new force. For those big shots, hundreds of years was not a long time. As long as Lin Yuan was willing to become their ally, they had plenty of time to wait for Lin Yuan to grow up and give some help to Lin Yuan in advance. Even Lin Yuan himself could not think of any way to refuse such a temptation. The quadripartite group sent a supreme cultivator, nicknamed Kong Lezen. He can be considered as a flag-bearer of the new generation of the quadripartite group. I don't have much information about him. After all, those who have seen him in action are all dead. There are only rumors that this Kong Lezen cultivates an ancient inheritance and is extremely proficient in divination. To him, misfortune and fortune can be seen with a single thought. I heard that the fire Kirin was sent here by the quadripartite group with the intention of replacing the Beast Lord Kirin as the Beast Lord of the Hengduan Mountains. However, the fire Kirin did not fight the Beast Lord Kirin and found a hidden place to hide in the periphery of the Hengduan Mountains. However, it still has a supreme treasure that belongs to the quadripartite group. This time, Kong Lezen came to the northern frontier to retrieve this treasure. Therefore, this subordinate boldly speculates that the Shifter Emperor should soon meet this Kong Lezen. After all, you came to Shunning City with the fire Kirin. Now that the fire Kirin is dead, its treasures are most likely to fall into your hands. Ding Zai licked his lips and felt that his throat was a little dry. After all, with Kong Lezen's rumored abilities, he had probably deduced that Ding Zai had been betrayed. Although it was impossible for him to know the specific conversation between Ding Zai and Lin Yuan, it was not difficult for him to see the scene of Ding Zai talking to Lin Yuan. Therefore, Ding Zai had taken a big risk by revealing Kong Lezin's identity. Although Shanglu Association and Four United Gang were on the same level, Kong Lezin couldn't possibly not give them face. However, Ding Zai and Kong Lezin weren't on the same level. If Kong Lezin wanted to vent his anger on him, Shanglu Association wouldn't be able to protect him. Now, he could only hope that Lin Yuan was really that valuable in the eyes of those big shots. This way, he could rope in Lin Yuan as a future ally. Only then would those big shots personally speak up to protect him, lest he become a sacrifice. Another thing is news about Yang Qinglin. Although this guy is a figure from 14,000 years ago, there are quite a lot of records about him. It is said that Yang Qinglin was extremely ferocious when he was young. Not to mention provoking him, even if he didn't like you, he would think of ways to make you pay a painful price. Therefore, the Shifter Emperor didn't agree to meet Yang Qinglin previously. You even secretly captured Old Demon Blood Sea. If Yang Qinglin knew about this, I'm afraid he would hate the Shifter Emperor to death. It is even possible that he would personally take action. Since he had decided to unite with Lin Yuan, Ding Zai immediately became a lackey. However, at this point, Ding Zai helplessly spread out his hands and said bitterly, "To be honest, the Shifter Emperor, this subordinate has already sent someone to inform Yang Qinglin of your situation. Therefore, this subordinate guesses that he can't wait to skin you alive." Lin Yuan. It was not terrible to be targeted by a cultivator who had just entered the Heaven Gang realm. In Lin Yuan's opinion, there was no difference between a cultivator of this realm and him being an enemy and giving him attribute points. However, his opponent had changed from a novice, who had just entered the Heaven Gang realm, to an old devil who had left many trump cards for himself before reincarnating. This made Lin Yuan unhappy at all. However, Ding Zai's information was indeed terrifying. Not many people knew that he had secretly captured Old Demon Blood Sea. The one who was most likely to sell him out to Ding Zai should be Wine Sword Mystery, who had left in a hurry. However, Wine Sword Mystery had no reason to do so because Ding Zai could be considered to be the one who had single-handedly orchestrated the destruction of the Jiao clan's remnant. Although there were still traces of the Jiao clan's remnants in various parts of the Xunwu dynasty, the northern frontier was the border of the Xunwu dynasty and coincidentally near the Hengduan mountain range. Naturally, the Jiao clan's remnants would treat it as their base camp. Therefore, almost all the survivors of the Jiao clan gathered at the northern frontier. First, they were suppressed by the Shifter Emperor Association. Then, they lost contact with the Hengduan mountain range. Then, under the control of Ding Zai and the Shanglu Association, the Jiao clan's remnants had completely offended the Shifter Emperor Association. Those who didn't retreat from the northern frontier in time were all killed by the members of the Shifter Emperor Association. Those fellows in other regions were only having fun now. Once their resources were exhausted, it would only be a matter of time before they were completely wiped out. Wine Sword Mystery might not be interested in reviving the Jiao clan, but this didn't mean that he could tolerate others wantonly slaughtering his own clansmen. It was even more impossible for him to tolerate Ding Zai, the main culprit who had caused the Jiao clan's remnants to end up in such a state. If Wine Sword Mystery knew Ding Zai's identity, it wasn't impossible for him to draw his sword and kill Ding Zai. Lord Shifter Emperor need not worry too much. Ding Zai stretched out his hand and touched his nose. He smiled and said, "Your subordinate doesn't need any information. As long as I know the general situation, I can piece together some clues. Then, I can gather all these clues and know the result. Although it's not accurate, it's not far from it." Lin Yuan was once again choked by Ding Zai's words. But thinking about it, if Ding Zai's associative ability wasn't so rich, he wouldn't have been able to secretly plan a killing move against the Shifter Emperor Association and Lin Yuan under Lin Yuan's careful planning. Although it was all broken by Lin Yuan and his identity was exposed, It was still much better than Lei Fan, who took advantage of Lin Yuan's absence to act recklessly. However, according to your subordinate's reliable information, when Kong Lezin just entered Shunning City, for some unknown reason, he suddenly changed his calm and collected manner. It is said that several inns in Shunning City were smashed by Kong Lezin. Your subordinate guesses that Kong Lezin must have had a conflict with Yang Qinglin or some other existence, and even suffered a loss. As Ding Zai spoke, he once again spread out his hands and said, "Now, what Lord Shifter Emperor should be dealing with is not Yang Qinglin, but Hu Yen. As far as I know, Hu Yen is extremely dissatisfied with your action of attacking the northern frontier families. He tried to persuade you, but to no avail. He simply fell out with Li Zhong. At this time, he should have already begun to deal with Li Zhong." "Yes, I know." Lin Yuan nodded slightly, but there wasn't the slightest ripple in his different-colored eyes. Chapter 411. Undercurrents were surging under the northern frontier. On the surface, Hu Yen and Li Zhong were fighting. In the dark, the Shang Lu Association, the Demon Emperor Association, the Four United Group, and even Yang Qinglin of the Divine Blood Sect were secretly plotting to get what they wanted. However, the Shenwu dynasty was not as peaceful as the northern frontier. Lei Qiusheng, who had been silent for nearly half a year, changed his declining trend. Shen Linjun, who had been hiding for years and only had the reputation of being an elite, brazenly moved out. In the first battle, they showed their edge to the world. 300,000 miles to the south of the imperial city, the rebel army formed by the big clans, even if there were dozens of times more than Shen Linjun, was destroyed in a face-to-face confrontation. Hearing about the war in the south, millions of miles to the north of the imperial city were in a state of panic. Because of the existence of the northern frontier, not many people dared to rebel. After all, Lin Yuan chose to live with the light and dust when he was at his peak. No one knew what kind of secret agreement Lin Yuan had with Lei Qiusheng. They were all worried that they would be attacked by the Shenwu dynasty and the northern frontier if they took advantage of the chaos to raise their troops. Almost overnight, the situation changed drastically. All the rebel armies to the north of the imperial city either disbanded on the spot or fled at the sight of the wind. Those who usually boasted of being famous generals and ambitious people were scared witless. There was no lack of existences who went to the imperial city alone to confess to Lei Qiusheng. However, these people were too stupid. Although Lin Yuan took the opportunity to control the northern frontier first, he chose to be silent when the Shenwu dynasty was at its most chaotic instead of adding insult to injury. This would help Lei Qiusheng stabilize the situation as much as possible. Therefore, even if Lei Qiusheng was dissatisfied, he would not really fall out with Lin Yuan. Naturally, he would give the territory and try to satisfy Lin Yuan's conditions. Surrendering when you had a chance of winning and surrendering when you were forced into a corner were two different things. Therefore, most of the people who ran over to Lei Qiusheng out of fear and didn't know what to do had a good ending. Although Shen Linjun had not yet covered the southern coastal region, the monsters under the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had all ceased their activities. Back then, when Lei Qiusheng was sweeping the lands for the Wanjian dynasty, many demonic beasts from the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had suffered losses at his hands. Now that Lei Qiusheng had changed his previous dejected appearance and directly sent out troops to sweep the lands, even those who did not know the cause of the chaos in the Shenwu dynasty could guess that Lei Qiusheng had probably solved the problem at hand and was about to settle the score. Not long ago, the world was still in chaos. However, the moment Lei Qiusheng made his move, the direction of the situation immediately changed. Some busybodies also specially analyzed the current situation. The chaos in the Shenwu dynasty would last for no more than 3 years. Now, only Lin Yuan, Qing Peng Lei Qiuming, Frost Mirror Mahamu, and Qing Jiang Sun Qianfan had the ability to wrestle with Lei Qiusheng at the northern frontier. They had both internal and external troubles. Except for these four forces, the rest of the rebel forces were just chickens and pottery dogs to Lei Qiusheng. At the same time, northern frontier, shunning city's military camp. Lin Yuan straightened his body. His gaze fell on the 200,000 soldiers of the southern expedition who were performing martial arts on the drill ground. His heterochromatic eyes revealed a cold color. Although the 3 million soldiers of the southern expedition had not yet expanded to the point of being fully staffed, they had 3 million soldiers. Moreover, these soldiers who were recruited to the southern expedition were originally people who were unwilling to work in the northern frontier to support themselves. They were ruffians and scoundrels who spent all day on the street. Now, under Li Zhongxing's command, they already had the shadow of a strong army. I didn't know that Lord Dragon King would come in person. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you. Li Zhongxing, who was wearing a silver-white armor, strode to Lin Yuan with 2 of his personal guards. He knelt on one knee and cupped his fist. Although Li Zhongxing's temperament was relatively simple, as a military seedling selected by Shen Lin Jun, he was obviously not a kind person. After learning from Luo Su for a period of time, although Li Zhongxing was not as intolerant as before, he also maintained a tacit attitude towards some of the unspoken rules. He was clear in his rewards and punishments, and was cautious in his private matters. He could be considered a qualified commander. Especially after the incident with Lei Fan, although Li Zhongxing was wholeheartedly immersed in the military camp, he was no longer as ignorant as before about the situation in the northern frontier. He was very clear that Lin Yuan usually either cultivated near the demonic beast forest, or directly went to the northern frontier prince's mansion to explain some details and changes of the new policy. He would not stroll around. Therefore, when he knew that Lin Yuan appeared in the southern battlefront army's military camp, Li Zhongxing put down the things at hand and hurried over. Li Zhongxing. Lin Yuan was still looking at the soldiers who were performing martial arts on the drill ground. This general is here. Li Zhongxing cupped his fists again and replied in a deep voice. I order you to lead the soldiers under your command out of Shunning Pass and clean up the rebels in the south. Return a peaceful land to the Shenwu dynasty. Lin Yuan's voice was very calm, as if he was just talking about a trivial matter. Li Zhongxing's body trembled as he looked at Lin Yuan's back in disbelief. Although they were far apart and even the Council of the Demon Emperor did not have any definite information, but now that the Shenwu dynasty had sent out troops to clean up the south, the news of the rebels fleeing at the mere sight of them was definitely not groundless. As the largest branch of the rebels, Lin Yuan was definitely not stupid enough to not be able to distinguish who was his enemy and naively think that his position was stable after the Shenwu dynasty had conferred him a title. At this time, he was sending troops to the south to clean up the rebels. Could it be, it's as you think? This king wants to seize territory. If we don't seize this opportunity to seize territory, when the Shenwu dynasty stabilizes, we won't have enough trump cards to fall out with Lei Qiusheng. Secondly, even if Lei Qiusheng is afraid of us and won't do anything to us, he won't give us a chance to continue growing. Lin Yuan's voice was still calm. He just smiled and said, after this battle, I want to be the real king of the northern frontier. This general naturally understands the Dragon King's intention, but the soldiers under this general's command. Li Zhongxing looked worriedly at the soldiers practicing martial arts on the drill ground. A trace of hesitation flashed across his eyes. Lin Yuan wanted the most remote northern frontier, the northern part of the Shenwu dynasty. Before he saw the big river called Wei River that separated the imperial city from the north, he and his soldiers could not stop. A mere 3 million soldiers would definitely not be able to take over such a large territory and wipe out the rebels north of the Shenwu dynasty's imperial city. If the soldiers aren't good, then train them as you fight. If the soldiers aren't good enough, then recruit them as you fight. If you don't have enough soldiers, don't you still have the surrendered troops? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids and sneered. Don't tell me that you, Shen Lin Jun's reserve military officer, aren't as good at training soldiers as a bunch of temporary flower frames. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.